Katie, are you all set when we're ready, when we hit 6:30? Okay. Heather, if you're on, could you unmute and say hello? There you are. I
I'm
see
here.
you. Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It's Monday, December 14th, 2020. We are meeting virtually by Google Hangouts and conference calls. Could you call the roll, Ms. Heights?
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Maring?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Present.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Ms. Bijak?
Here.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Zak?
Present. Board has a quorum. I've been presented, or I've seen proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin open meetings law. That notice is with Ms. Heights, if anyone wishes to inspect it at a later point. Our agenda tonight contains our usual items. For action items, we have ratification of the 2021 OEA collective bargaining agreement. Then we'll receive the audit report from Andy and review that briefly. And the action item will be to receive that along with the fund balance report. Then we'll have informational items from Dr. Bergstrom on our continuing discussion of our phased restart program and opening of the school. Spring school board election update, and then the superintendent's report. We have two items for closed session. One would be to confer with respect to shared service agreement with the village, and then a continuing work on our superintendent's evaluation. At the conclusion of those closed sessions, the board will not be convening into open session. That's our posted agenda. I need a motion to approve that agenda as posted.
This is Krista. I'll second Krista.
Katie, do you have those? Would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Maring?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, we have an approved agenda. Item A under that agenda is the consent calendar. Is there any item under the consent calendar that any board member wishes to have removed?
Nothing to be removed, Steve, but I would just note that I was not in attendance at the executive closed session on November 23rd.
Okay, and that will be reflected in your vote on this. Then I would need a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar.
This is Tim. I move the items on the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll
This is
second.
Anna.
Heather.
Heather gets it.
Heather's got the second on that. I will note we have 4 donations for approval tonight. One from Ryan Kirsten and Fatima Siles, All Sports and More LLC, donated 64 32-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer for Forest Edge. Bob and Litha Schenkenberg, $75 to the Oregon Pool. Oregon Hometown Pharmacy LLC, $650 for student masks and raised garden beds at Forest Edge, and an anonymous donation of $250 in honor of OMS special ed staff to be used by the special ed department at OMS. So we thank those folks for their generous donations and contributions to our district. With that, would you call the roll on the motion to approve the items on the consent calendar?
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Maring,
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz,
Yes.
Ms. Bijak,
Yes.
Mr. Zock.
Yes, those motions are carried. That takes us to item B on information items. First is comments received from the public regarding agenda items. Because we are not meeting in person, we've established ground rules for the receipt of emails and those would be limited to 250 words and submitted to Katie Heights by 4 p.m. on Monday of the board meeting. I note that as we're moving into board election year, the standard board practice has been that if someone is running for a seat, that they can introduce themselves and indicate the seat that they're running from and a little bit of background. But no further communications or campaigning will be allowed in terms of this part of the agenda. I conferred with district legal counsel. There's a specific prohibition on campaigning on school district grounds and during meetings. And so as we move forward, that will be the ground rules. But for those of you who are going to be candidates for the 2 seats set up, which we'll discuss later, there certainly will be an opportunity to provide an introduction and notice that you are running. So then we have a number of commentary and communications from the public, and I will turn it over to our clerk, Krista Flanagan, to read those.
Thanks,
We
Steve.
have 1 hour, Adam. I will extend the deadline to 1 hour, but I don't think we'll be anywhere close to that tonight. Go.
Thanks, Steve. And I'll just reiterate that board does not comment as a practice on letters that are submitted to be read. So I'll just go ahead and read them one after the other in the order they were received. The first is, I would like this letter to be read at the next school board meeting. More importantly, I would like this letter answered in writing to me as well as to the community at the next school board meeting. This evening, 11:23, a parent wrote to the school board and said that she recently discovered her son was missing from a class for the entire first quarter. The student's teacher never addressed the missing student. The parent discovered it when she contacted the student's homeroom teacher about a test score. I was shocked by this revelation, so I watched the entire meeting with great interest. Apparently, the parent's email did not provoke any concern from Dr. Bergstrom, as she did not address this in her report. Perhaps even more disturbing, it did not provoke any concern from any of the board members because none of you inquired of Dr. Bergstrom as to how this may have happened. One might reasonably conclude that the board is not paying attention to letters from the community. As a board, you have fabricated a fiction that operational matters must be left to the superintendent and that the board's only responsibility is oversight. Even if your responsibility ends with oversight, you are derelict in your duty. Effective oversight requires you to demand an explanation of how a student can be overlooked by a teacher for an entire quarter. How do you intend to exercise oversight over the OSD administration? Sincerely, Robert P. Palmer, 633 Prairie Grass Road, Oregon, Wisconsin, 53575. Dear Dr. Bergstrom and board, I would like to say a special thank you to Dr. Bergstrom, Mr. Zock, Mr. Pankratz, Mr. LeBrun, Ms. Flanagan, and Ms. Garrison, as well as some members of our medical working group for participating in the Zoom call with Dr. Joseph Allen of the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard. Dr. Allen outlined ways for us to open our schools safely and stressed that schools need to be open fully in person. He talked about how the hybrid models that have been used around the country are actually more likely to increase spread due to the need for alternative care when children are not in school and less control over their interactions during the times they are out of school. He said that he fully supports in-school athletics because, much like hybrid classrooms, club sports bring together kids from multiple schools and towns and increase points of contact. Dr. Allen spoke of a soon-to-be-released revision to the Harvard study. Harvard is looking at new scientific understanding and current information to update their June-July position. It is time that OSD also look at new scientific understanding and current information to update its position. Big mistake was how Dr. Allen described not opening schools in the fall. Let's right that wrong for our kids. I look forward to hearing how you will take the information Dr. Allen imparted and use it to adjust our reopening plan with the urgency he stressed. Sincerely, Kim Palmer, Oregon parent, on behalf of Bring Kids Back OSD. Dear Oregon School Board members, I'm writing to ask you to open Oregon schools for in-person instruction. Many families in Oregon are feeling disappointed, frustrated, even angry. Oregon has closed its school and as a result has lost its community. Families are more isolated than ever. During a pandemic, we should be caring for our own and pulling together. I hope you had a chance to watch the video discussion with Dr. Joseph Allen last week. He is a very reputable resource and made some excellent points. Number one, in-person teaching is far superior to virtual teaching. Historically, online students score much lower than in-person students. A recent pandemic study has already shown a clear decrease in math skills in virtual students compared to in-person. Disadvantaged students are at even greater risk of falling behind. Two, schools are essential. They are not a major source of COVID infections. Bars and restaurants are. They should be open just like clinics, grocery stores, and hospitals. Three, kids are not a major source of COVID spread, particularly elementary and middle school children. Kids have a much lower risk of getting the infection and a much lower risk of becoming severely ill. Four, hybrid models may not be the best approach. All-in models may be better as they keep kids in school rather than bouncing from daycare, a friend or family member's house, a neighbor's house, etc. Five, in-school sports activities are recommended for the same reason. We should have our kids play together in our facilities rather than traveling out of town and exposing our kids and community unnecessarily. Six, it comes down to basic hand washing, sanitizing, masks, air filtration, and social distancing. There is no science behind the 6 feet rule. Distance helps, but in some countries, 3 feet is considered sufficient. Kids, staff, and the community need to be educated to put forth a community-wide effort to promote good health. Seven, the mental health of our kids and families is suffering. I see this daily working as a family medical physician assistant in Oregon. Long-term effects are unknown but worrisome. Distributing online resources and the suicide hotline are simply not enough. Getting our kids back to school is a difficult process, but it can be done. Many surrounding schools have done so successfully, and we can learn from them. Oregon is asking your help in working to restore our community by letting families have the choice to return to school. It is what families want and need, and it is your job to represent them. Please let us work together to make a definitive plan to resume in-person teaching in January. Thank you. Please contact me if I can be of assistance. Joanna Hebgen, PA-C, SSM Health, Oregon Family Medicine. As the parent of 2 high school students, my comments pertain only to this environment. Upon reading and rereading the phased restart information presented this week, I am at a loss as to what the plan for high school is. I do not believe this is a formal plan. It contains no set start date. It is simply an idea that you are trying to present as a plan. The concept of a hybrid school week is not new. It was discussed as one of 3 opening options last summer. For 4 months, my boys have been taught sometimes by teachers, other times by strangers via video links. It appears this will continue for an unspecified amount of time. When, or should I say if, my boys return to high school under this proposed plan, I understand there will be no teaching during the 8 hours a week they are in school. In-person time will be teacher-guided practice, reteaching, and answering questions. New instruction will be delivered asynchronously through video lectures, screencasts, and slides. I'll strip this concept down for you. High school students in this district will be fully teaching themselves from videos for potentially the full semester, AP classes included. They will be able to interface with the teacher 2 times a week, but all new instruction becomes asynchronous. I fail to see how this can be passed down to parents and students as an acceptable model of education. Please return them to school as soon as possible and let them be taught by teachers. Do not delay. Start them with this proposed concept on day 1 of the 2nd semester. Time is of the essence. Sincerely, Karen Taylor. Dear OSD School Board, thank you for continuing to keep the community safe by following the science that reflects virtual learning being safest for most of our kids. We've managed to keep the community spread in Oregon low due to this community-wide effort. I realize as the science changes to reflect new data, as science always does, new directives may be implemented. I'm grateful that the OSD has been planning for kids to get back into the classroom since the beginning of this pandemic. I think most of us want our kids to be able to be in the classroom as soon as it's safe. I feel confident that the OSD will continue to follow the science, and I support the decisions you have made and will continue to make at this time. Sincerely, Dana Kobernutz. Members of the Oregon School Board, as we near the end of the first semester during this unprecedented pandemic, we wanted to send a quick note to say thank you and Superintendent Bergstrom for putting science, data, and public safety at the center of your decision making. We have 2 children in the phased restart at Northernwood Knoll and daily experience the professionalism, support, and kindness of OSD staff and teachers. Even with the changing sands of the public health crisis and pressure to adapt from many sides, OSD teachers and staff have been heroes to our family. During this semester, our youngest requires some additional emotional and academic support as we all get to know her emerging learning style and needs. Netherwood Knoll staff and teachers jumped in quickly as a team to help us with the plan and are providing support from different specialists virtually. It has made a significant difference to our family and our child's confidence levels. We are so thankful for them. There is no doubt that COVID-19 is making daily life hard for nearly everyone, but we would be kidding ourselves if getting the kids back in the classroom would be the silver bullet that makes this historic and global experience easier on families or children. We have seen how this approach in other districts has actually made life harder on teachers, families as they see in-classroom COVID cases on the rise, which then forces inconsistent learning delivery models. Academic whiplash, some may say, and we also know these districts are now experiencing unexpected significant hits to their budget due to the lack of planning, budget hits that will need to be addressed long after this school year. As we begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel with viable vaccines that will begin rolling out to first responders soon, we encourage you and Superintendent Bergstrom to please stay focused on the values and data utilized to make the first semester successful and safe. As COVID cases continue to rise throughout Wisconsin, now is not the time to begin taking risks and ignoring science. Looking to the second semester, we hope you will continue to protect the health of OSD teachers, staff, and students while maintaining the quality education we experienced the first semester. Thank you for your commitment to providing a quality education while also focusing on protecting the health of OSD children, teachers, and staff. And thank you for your unwavering leadership during these challenging times. Wishing you all a happy new year. Tony Vidal, Molly Dillman Vidal. Dear OSD administration and school board members, we would like to voice our appreciation for the way OSD administration and school board continue to work so hard to accommodate the needs of students, staff, and wider community. The amount of time spent on the ever-evolving situation must be tremendous. We are in full support of your continued efforts to prioritize the health and safety of students and staff while taking next steps in the process of moving forward. Andrea's home country of Germany is currently going into an almost complete lockdown with all schools closing as well as most businesses until at least January 10th, amid rising numbers. We are considerably lower per capita than here. Nobody enjoys this situation, but we can get through this if we work together and support each other. Please continue to follow the science. Inconvenience and stubbornness are no excuse to jeopardize the safety of others. With best regards, Andrea and Derek Bilo. Dear Oregon School Board, I am writing to you solely as a parent of a child in the Oregon School District. I really appreciate how all of you on the board and the school district administrators, teachers, and employees have handled the COVID-19 situation. These are complicated and scary times. Although all parents in the district want our children back in school and our local economy to return to normal, we disagree on when it is safe to do so. I appreciate all of you using science and facts to be cautious in your approach. Giving parents the choice of online only or hybrid instruction when it is safe to reopen is the kindest and safest way to proceed in a very difficult situation. I encourage you to keep analyzing the facts and choose the time when it is proven safe for kids to come back, not just for themselves, but for their teachers, families, and the entire community. Our economy will eventually come back, but those who die from this virus never will. There is light at the end of this very long tunnel. Vaccines are coming. Stand strong against the pressure to reopen too soon. Thank you, Amanda Peterson. I received your email address from another OHS parent. I'm not sure what all challenges you are faced with in the return to school plan, but I thought I'd offer my 2 cents for your next board meeting. 1, I'm a healthcare adjacent worker. My office is closed. Our in-person gatherings are shut down. There is no direct contact between us and our customers or patients unless absolutely required. The risk we would pose to those at risk of serious complications to COVID is too high, and as such, our organization has chosen to do everything in their power to limit that exposure. 2, my family owns and operates a farm. There is no sick time, no vacation time. Chores must be done. Lambing season is just a few months away, and with 60+ sheep, it's a month-long stint acting as midwife for pregnant ewes. You can't hire a babysitter or call in a neighbor to deliver multiple lambs at all hours of the day and night for a month straight. COVID on the farm is a nightmare scenario. 3, my family has pre-existing health concerns that could cause us to have severe issues with COVID. 4, the risk now is worse than it's been in the last 9 months. It makes no logical sense to push for a reopening now. It would make far more sense to identify the families that are struggling in the lockdown and finding ways of helping them. Regardless of the direction the school takes, we intend to keep our children on the remote learning program until the vaccine is widely available. Thanks, Rick Way. Dear Ms. Heights, school board members, and Ms. Bergstrom, please read this aloud at the school board meeting on December 14th. I'm writing to express my continued support for OSD's phased-in approach that prioritizes COVID-19 safety recommendations with CDC and public health statistics, findings, and recommendations given significant weight. I have a second grader and a fifth grader in the district. I was very concerned when my second grader returned to school 4 days a week while COVID numbers were on the rise. However, COVID cases in the schools so far have been kept at a minimum, and I'm aware the evidence shows there's little to no spread among students. So I'm much more comfortable now with the situation. I do not want to sign my children up for Oregon Online. My second grader is doing well with the online and in-person combination. My fifth grader, who has additional needs, was struggling daily with online instruction up to a few weeks ago. His needs are now being addressed by the school, so this is much less of an issue now. But he and I are both looking forward to when he can come back at school in person. That said, I do not want either of them back in school in person unless COVID safety protocols continue to be prioritized. If the district at any point decides to ignore public health recommendations and bring all kids back, I feel like we would be forced to choose Oregon Online in order to keep our families safe, even though that option will work less well for my second grader and is plain not working for my fifth grader. I'm aware mental health is a struggle for many students right now due to the fact that they cannot live life and attend school normally. However, it is a pandemic, and everyone is struggling to an extent in order to keep everyone safe. I think COVID safety needs to continue to be prioritized while students who are struggling academically or with mental health, or both, are provided reasonable accommodations and assistance whenever possible. Evidence shows that children and families of color are more vulnerable to this disease than white families, and if everyone is sent back, they will be put more at risk than the rest of the community. Also, struggling students whose families have fewer resources should continue to be prioritized during this time. Families with greater resources will make it through this with fewer repercussions. I appreciate your time and all of the hard decisions you have to continue to make. Please stay the course with your current plans. Thank you. Sincerely, Karen Davidson. Sorry, I need a drink. My name is Brady, and I'm a junior at Oregon High School. I'm writing to you because I believe that students at OHS deserve a chance to go to school in person. It is very hard to understand why we are not. Schools in our state that are twice as big are in person 5 days a week. Schools just 20 minutes from our town are in person. Counties with higher COVID numbers are in person. My family and I looked at other schools this fall in hopes of transferring, but because I am an athlete, we decided against this. The difference at the schools we toured is that the superintendent and school board have come up with many creative ideas to keep students coming to school. If the teachers do not want to come to school, have a class supervisor and have the teacher present from a live Zoom call. Have plexiglass around their desks. Masks will be worn and social distancing will be followed. In school, we are taught to find reasoning and evidence to support our answers. There's plenty of data that confirms that schools are safe. There is no excuse for not allowing us to be back in person at the start of the second semester. I argue that in person is actually safer for students. The fall of our mental health is much more dangerous than going to in-person school. Please let us come back in January. Braden. Dear school board, I just want to take a moment to thank you for all the hard work you continue to do to help ensure our children can return to in-person school when it is safe for them, for our teachers and others who work in our schools, and for our community to have them do so. I applaud you for creating the advisory board and for continuing to listen to science rather than being swayed by pressure from folks who want to send kids back without regard to what is best for all who will be affected. As a physician who cares for patients in both the inpatient hospital and outpatient clinic settings, I have seen the ravages this virus can cause and know we must be vigilant to continue to heed the guidance of our experts rather than let pandemic fatigue set in and just decide it's time to go back without evidence to support doing so will be safe. We are so fortunate to have leading experts in our Oregon community as well as phenomenal public health department to guide us. Please continue to listen to them. Best, Andrea Adilko Martinfee, MD. Dear Dr. Bergstrom, first, thank you for listening in on the interview with Dr. Joseph Allen concerning his recommendations on reopening schools across the U.S. His findings in the 60-page Harvard study report is the same study we have heard the Oregon OSD repeatedly quote, guiding our decisions for a safe return to school for our children. Dr. Allen stated that the risk focus of schools that have not opened yet hasn't looked at risk to children other than COVID. He said schools not opening in the fall was a missed opportunity and a terrible mistake, and questioned how schools are not considered essential given what is at stake. He emphasized that it is a national emergency to get kids back to school. He said the costs of keeping children out of school include virtual dropouts of the hundreds of thousands, food insecurity, loss in literacy gains, failing grades across the country, kids who are not at school are at risk of abuse, neglect, exploitation, and violence. Dr. Allen reemphasized that children are not super spreaders and their return does not put the community at risk. Considering he is an expert in risk reduction strategies for reopening schools, and even he considers the current metrics too conservative, I'm asking that we provide OSD parents a stronger timeline than TBD for when all of our students will be back in the classroom. Every lost day hurts our students more and amplifies this national Cook, parent of 2 OSD students. Mary Lakuta, PhD, statement of intent to run for the OSD School Board Area 1 Village of Oregon seat. My husband Drew and I have been proud members of this community for the last 24 years and have benefited greatly from this strong school district. Our daughter is a sophomore at OHS, and a 22-year-old son is an alum who teaches in the OHS AVID program. I am a strong supporter of public education and believe the skills that I have honed professionally support an analytical and compassionate approach, important qualities for school board members. I have a PhD in medical pathology and serve as the Director of Regulatory Affairs at Stratitech Corporation, where I develop strategies and act as the liaison to the Food and Drug Administration and other global health authorities. As a parent, I have always been active in the education of my children and all kids. I've been a regular career day contributor, an in-class volunteer, organized the Oregon PTO's Science Fair for many years, and also helped organize and run the Oregon PTO's Art Fair. In addition, I was on the RCI Site Council, where I gained a sound understanding and appreciation for the complexity of decisions made by administrators and the board. I am running for school board because I believe the role of the school board is to ensure that every student, educator, administrator, and staff member is advocated for and supported by the board. I believe my experiences, analytical skills, and strategic thinking, coupled with my sense of fairness, equity, and advocacy, will complement the strength of the school board to ensure that decisions continue to be made based on the best information available at the time. I would appreciate your support, and I'm asking for your vote. Mary Lakuta. My name is Benjamin Johnson. My son attends Forest Edge. Thank you for planning the fall opening of OSD in such a way that we have avoided many of the situations that are rife among other districts in Wisconsin. There are many reports of districts closing for weeks at a time, shifting back and forth from in-person to virtual, changing schedule mid-semester to reduce school days, and massive substitute teacher deficiencies. Though only having K2 in person is not ideal, neither are the above situations, and consistency is important as well. I do want to make a note on the substitute teacher need this district has expressed. My wife is a substitute in the district, along with my mother-in-law and a few family friends. Many of those people have decided not to return to subbing this year. Some are older and thus are higher risk. Their lack of return isn't unexpected. The younger substitutes, however, have also not continued subbing, my wife included, because the compensation is currently not sufficient to overcome the hurdles to finding childcare during a pandemic. The options available pre-COVID, such as grandparents, friends, and drop-in care, are no longer easy. Thus, I implore you to consider increasing compensation to make it financially worthwhile for our community to help support OSD and bringing more kids back in person, especially considering other districts will be increasing their in-person schooling as well, and thus pulling subs away from OSD. Thank you. Dr. Bergstrom and the Oregon School Board, we are fast approaching the end of Q2. Your stance has always been to get the younger grades in school first, then the high school students. High school students need to be in school starting Q3 as much, maybe more than younger students. What's your plan? You've taken away the importance of the transition from middle school to high school for freshmen, their first step to being a young adult. You've diminished the importance of high school in the sense of it being the place where your students develop into young adults, grow socially, emotionally, and mentally. It's not just a place of academic learning. You have taken away the choice of in-person learning for those who want it. We're all tired of seeing the same presentation about your phased-in restart approach with little action. The expectation for Q3 should be all kids return if they so choose, not just elementary and middle school students. I have personally watched my freshmen go from an A student to mentally disengaged, asking why they should try, motivation gone, feeling isolated with nowhere to turn. How do you explain to your students it's okay for elementary middle kids to return but not high school kids? How is their education, social, emotional, and mental well-being more important than a high school student? The Oregon School District needs to be a leader and get all kids back to school in January. Currently, your approach timeline is unacceptable. Thanks, the Webbers. Just in time for my voice to give out. We're done.
Is that all of them, Krista?
That is.
Thanks for reading them. And thanks for everyone for sending us your comments so that we can be better informed in terms of the viewpoints of our community that we serve. That takes us to OEA report, and I don't think we have a report tonight, but I know Laura's on. Student
correct.
report. Yep, Laura, no report tonight, correct?
Correct.
All right, Andrew, Chloe's not with us tonight, so you're on deck.
Correct. So
right.
our first order of business is this Wednesday. We are planning to start Panther Hangout. So this is something that Chloe has really worked hard on with the student services team. And they're trying to connect some freshmen, sophomores together so that they really have some good cohesion with their classmates and can replace some of that social emotional learning, as is common, or the common term for it, that they aren't really getting from being in online classes. Other than that, I know a lot of students are getting stir crazy as we approach the winter months. I know formerly they could head outside after finishing classes, shoot hoops, do different things. And now it's just unfeasible, and cabin fever's at an all-time high. That has led to students asking me, when will we be back? That is one of the biggest things they wanted me to directly ask you is, when will we be back? Not just the middle school students, not just the third through fifth graders, but high schoolers all the way up to seniors. That is the biggest question that everybody's asking me. I don't know how many of you noticed, but PHMDC released new information today that it kind of made school districts or the public aware of the injunction that actually happened back in September. And it says that now it is up to the school districts to decide, even though the school districts have been able to decide since back in September. It does give these regulations, which we are expected to follow is if we hope to have school. It does not change the metrics as far as where they believe it is safe to go into. So it says the shutdown point or the suggested move to online is right around 54 cases, which is anywhere between 5 and 10 cases per 100,000 people in Dane County. If you go to the CDC website, it has a tiered list of risk based on average cases per 100,000 people. And if you were to look at this, it would make perfect sense, because as the cases increase, your risk increases. That does not mean you are at a significantly higher risk. It just means that the risk increases. It also gives some information as far as sports and athletics. So I sincerely hope you guys look at that and deeply dive into that before you make your decision as for Q3. And do you guys have any questions for me that I can answer? I know sometimes hard to make decisions without the school or the student body's influence. So you can always reach out to me by email. You should all have it. So thank you.
Take off my mute. I think, Andrew, thanks. Dr. Bergstrom, I think, is going to talk to you about new information from Public Health Dane County Madison tonight, which happened today, and walk through that. So thanks for your information in terms of what you're hearing from the student body, and for the efforts in terms of trying to get more social interaction with the students. So thanks. Okay. Anybody with any questions for Andrew? I'm looking. Okay. I don't see any. Thanks, Andrew. Action items, agenda item C. First one is ratification of the 2021 OEA collective bargaining agreement. And Gina, is that you?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Steve.
And Steve, sorry, Gina, I'll just pop in here. I have a conflict of interest with this agenda item, as my spouse is covered under the agreement and we share household finances, so I will not participate in this discussion or vote. I will go on mute and turn off my camera item, and I'll be back at C2.
Thanks, Troy. And this is something when Troy took office, we understood this, got legal opinion in terms of how we used to handle this, and we've been proceeding in this fashion all along. through the course of negotiating the contract. So Gina, the floor is yours.
Okay, yes, and that was going to be my first item, was to talk to Mr. Pankratz. So we'll make sure we make a note of that in the minutes, that he did recuse himself for this discussion. So I am very happy to report that we have reached a tentative agreement with the OEA on the 2020-21 collective bargaining agreement. And I want to thank Mr. Andy Weiland for helping negotiate that agreement, because his knowledge and budget savviness was really critical in us reaching the tentative agreement. So thank you for that. And the OEA has ratified this agreement. So my request tonight is for the board to vote and ratify the agreement as well. You should have the tentative agreement in front of you. But just to explain, the law is that we are only allowed to offer up to base wages under state law, and base wages are certified by the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission. So for this contract year, it was 1.81% was determined to be CPI. So we did offer that to the OEA, and then we talked about how to distribute that. And for everyone's pool of knowledge, the money that teachers receive when they move between levels is not part of base wages under the law. So that's additional compensation. If we looked at the total package in terms of how much is spent on this tentative agreement, it is around 4% when you look at base wages plus movement through the schedule. So if you look at the schedule itself, we did add $500 to the green level and $500 to the orange level, and then $1,500 to the blue level. And we did that additional money on the blue level because that is where most of our teachers are, as well as we need to be competitive with other Dane County districts and districts around Wisconsin, because we all are competing for the same group of teachers. And then we have a small group of folks who are off schedule, and they will receive a 2% stipend that does not go on their contract, but is money in their pocket. And so what we talked about with the OEA is that we want to start, I should say, continue discussions about how teachers can move into our purple level, because we know that there is significant interest from our teachers in doing so. And also competitively, we will need to do that, as well as hopefully find a longer term solution to our teachers off schedule. Because the teachers who are off schedule would prefer money go on their contract. So we're asking the board to approve this tentative agreement tonight. It is within our budget. And as I mentioned, it was approved by the OEA. If the board does approve this tonight, the HR department will start working very hard to have employees receive this increase on the December 23rd payroll, which would be a nice time to give our employees that increase. So that is all I have to report. What questions do you have for me?
Any board member have any question for Gina? No, this is something we've been working on for a couple months now.
This is Anna. I just have one quick clarifying question. And it really isn't necessarily critical to the amounts you're talking about for increase, but you mentioned that the base salary does not include the different steps. So does that mean that the base salary is at that green level for all educators that are covered by this? And then anything else is considered an add-on or an additional? Am I understanding that correctly?
So it's a good question. So it's a little bit different if I'm understanding your question. So if you look at the amount, so for example, for our green level, which is our newer teachers who are in steps 1 through 5, we increased that by $500 from last year. So that money would be part of what we call base wages, because it's the amount of money that the level increased. But if you look at the increase a teacher would receive from moving from the green level to the orange level, then that's called movement. So
Sure.
While the teacher does receive that money, it's not by law allowed to be in our calculation for base wages. It's called supplemental compensation.
Okay.
So when you look at our budget, you'll really see two parts to our budget. One is movement costs, is how we labeled it. And that's the increase that teachers receive moving between those levels. And then the other is the base wage increase. And you'll see that in the budget for the 1.81%. that's the amount of money we have to put on those dollar amounts themselves.
And
That
just
clears
to,
it up. That clears it up.
and just to jump in on that, the 1.8, which is on the base wage, is the CPI maximum that we're allowed to give under the law. And so that comes from our annual operating budget. The movement also comes from the annual operating budget, was part of our contemplated funding through the override through the referendum.
Right.
Okay. So, the direct increase, we had anticipated that because of the plan itself, and that's already been funded through the referendum. And then the rest is just CPI increase. Is that right, Gene? Is that accurate?
That's correct. That's why you'll see two different items when Andy does the report.
Thank you.
Any
That
other questions? Krista?
Gina, if you could just comment, because I think this is really important, because we made this move to this salary schedule as part of a referendum that this community supported because they believed in our teachers and what this salary schedule could do, ultimately putting the best teacher in every classroom. So from an HR perspective, can you tell us how this has worked for you in your view in terms of how this has really helped retain the great teachers that we currently have, and then help you within recruitment as we lose teachers every year based on transfers to a different community or things kind of outside of our control?
Yes, and I say this with all honesty, we would be lost if we had not passed that referendum. This has been absolutely critical for us, not only retaining our excellent teachers, but recruiting them as well. There is a significant teacher shortage, not only in Wisconsin, but statewide. And this has helped us stay competitive with area districts, particularly those that are a similar size to us. And so I am really thankful to report that most years we do not lose any teachers to other Dane County schools for similar positions. Our attrition is really what I call teachers leave us for love, because usually their spouse or partner gets relocated. And so they leave us because anytime a teacher does offer a resignation, I do talk with that teacher about the reasons for leaving. And so that is the number one reason, is relocation for a partner or significant other. The other reason is that we may not have a position available for them. So for example, they would like to be a program support coordinator and we only have one. And so there's an opening for that in another district. So I don't have a comparable job for them. I will say for this year in particular, and looking at other Dane County schools, we had the lowest turnover rate if I exclude people that left for relocation reasons. So it has really allowed us to keep the excellent staff that we have, as well as we are a destination district that people interview with us because they've heard about Oregon, and not just our salary schedule, but with the work culture and professional development that we have. And the professional development is a critical component of our salary schedule. And in addition, we have great teachers and administrators who do professional development in other districts or statewide. And when people are asked how they've heard about the Oregon School District, it's often because they've seen a teacher leader or an administrator present at a conference. And talk about, the wonderful professional development opportunities that we have. So honestly, it has been the key to us being able to recruit and retain. So I appreciate your question, Krista, and you can see I've gone on probably a little long, but I'm just so thankful that we have it because it has been a key part of our success.
No, I just think that's really important, for board members potentially that are new, that aren't as familiar when we went through this process of really developing this salary schedule. And I also really want to thank the community for supporting it. I think we've really kept up our end of the bargain in terms of what we've moved to in terms of a teaching staff. And I really want to thank our teaching staff. They are incredible people. We've put in 5 more additional days of professional development. They've embraced it and risen to the occasion. We know the salary schedule isn't perfect for everyone, and we're trying to deal with some of those things, but it's a work in progress. And like you said, it's getting us to be a destination district, which our families and our community should be really proud of. Thank you.
Any other questions for Gina? All right, the recommendation on the table is to approve the OEA district contract as negotiated and as ratified by the OEA and as presented by Gina tonight. Is there a motion to that effect?
I will move approval. It's Krista.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Anna.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would just like to add my thanks to the OEA for, I know we had some issues with respect to the off-chart folks and to our upper-level folks, and I appreciate your willingness to move ahead with the ratification of this contract, given the tough times that we are in and the difficult year that we're in. We've heard you that we want to continue our dialogue on those two areas, and we will do so. Okay. Call the roll.
Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Ms. Bijak,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison,
Could you hear me? Yes.
thank you.
No.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Maring,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz.
Abstain, mark him as
Oh,
abstain.
yep, sorry, thank you. Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Mr. Zach.
Yes, we have a ratified contract. So thanks. And Gina, good luck. Get those checks out before Christmas to everyone.
Thank you. We will.
Thank you to you and Andy for doing the negotiating on behalf of the board, and to the OEA bargaining team. Thank you, so that we could get a quick resolution. That takes us to action item 2, which is the acceptance of the June 30, 2020 audit report. This is a process that we go through every year. The recommendation at the end would be to accept the audit. And so Andy's going to go briefly over some of the highlights of this. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Zach. So the board members will get a bound copy when we get a chance to get those in your hands. But there's a digital copy that's connected to the agenda item tonight that you have. A couple just comments real briefly. First one is that the audit actually is not completely done. There is some single audit stuff that has to be done from the feds. We're still waiting. The auditors are still actually waiting for direction related to that. And so the majority of the audit's done. The stuff that the State Department of Instruction needs is all done, but just some federal guidance that will still have to happen. The second thing that I'll mention in the audit is that there's actually kind of two sets of numbers in the audit, which usually business folks don't like, but it's part of the deal. And there's something called the condensed statement of net position. That has kind of some actuarial projections in it. It also has depreciation and assets. So we don't specifically spend a lot of time related to that. The majority of the data that we use is related to how DTI works with our finances. And there's actually a reconciliation in there that will give you a headache if you try to figure out the two there. So keep that in mind. But that said, I'm going to just quickly touch on the high points of the audit, and then I'll be available for questions. I would recommend the document, though. There's a lot of narrative in there that actually kind of talks about different components of the school finances that at least I find fairly interesting. So just going through this, you probably won't have any surprises. I've been sharing the information with you actually for months now, but you can kind of see that the fund balance did increase. This is the general fund balance by the $1.5 million that we've been talking about from last year. We saved some money related to utilities, transportation, some other things that some school supplies, those types of things that we intentionally kind of squirreled away for use this year as we go through the COVID situation for different things like Chromebooks for students, as well as cleaning supplies and those types of things. Just typical, assets minus liabilities equals fund balance equation here as we go through. And like I said, it's about a $1.5 million increase. Sorry, I went a little too fast. Now we break that fund balance into a couple different components. That's determined by the Governmental Accounting Standards Bureau. One is non-spendable. That's basically land purchases, and in this situation, also the school construction house, the Panther construction house, that we had not sold at that point in time. We had an acceptable offer, but we had not closed yet. So that's what that $543,000 is. The restricted is related to mostly our self-funded dental insurance plan. And you can see that our increase, there was a fairly significant increase this last year, partially because our dental community wasn't able to do dental work from about March until the end of the year. So we weren't spending a lot of money for dental claims. What we did to try to adjust to that, because we had employees that had kind of pent up dental needs, is we actually increased our maximum benefit by $1,000 starting for this 1 year. So we anticipate actually trying to spend a little bit of that down this year and get it back to where it was, so that we can kind of make our employees whole for the period of time that they weren't really able to go to the dentist. The assigned fund balance, that's where that $1.5 million went. You can kind of do the math between those two numbers. That's in there for that. Otherwise, we had basically the same, very similar leftover amounts from other organizations or other components of our budget. So school carryover, departmental carryover, and then the OEA teacher schedule was left over as well. Unassigned, as we talk about every year, that's really our cash flow mechanism. And if you go through the financial statements that we put in monthly, you'll actually see some really neat graphs that Cara Newton puts together for you every year, or every month actually, that kind of shows where our low months are as far as cash. And actually mid-month, we actually do analysis of that. And we've gotten through November without any problems. We're not needing to borrow money or anything. But January will be a little bit tight between after our first payroll. So you can kind of see the amounts there. We do a quick calculation just to kind of show what's happening with the fund balance, and we're using, in this situation, the unassigned fund balance, because that's the amounts for cash flow purposes. There is a difference when our auditor does this analysis. They use budgets. We use actuals because we just felt more comfortable with that. And that's what's in our book fund policy, our fund balance policy, which was adopted way back when we only had about $3 million in fund balance about 20 years ago. So we were able to basically get to where we wanted to get to, which was basically not having to borrow for cash flow purposes, and by following that policy, which was our goal. But we haven't grown it more than that. And then here's just a quick historical chart of kind of what's happened with our fund balances over the years as a percentage of our expenditures. And you can kind of see that our unassigned has been going down a little bit. Our assigned went up fairly significantly this last year because of the $1.5 million that we put aside for the COVID expenses. This is just adding basically the general fund and the special education fund together. And again, kind of seeing what's going on with budget to actual. So if you were to look just at our budget, we had budgeted, of course, this was pre-COVID for 2019-20, that we were going to utilize about $1.4 million than we brought in. That's all related to carryover dollars that we gave back to the schools and departments for purposes from prior years. And then what actually happened was significantly different, obviously, and that's that $1.5 million in addition that we put aside. Now we'll just quickly touch on the other funds that we have in the school district. The special revenue funds are outside of special education, so don't be confused by that special word. Community service and special revenue trusts. Our special revenue trusts are basically contributions given to us, gifts that are given to us that would span being used over multiple years, or our student activity funds that we run a lot of different activities for. And you can just kind of see that they're fairly consistent from year to year. Food service fund, we talked a lot about that this summer. You can see that we did unfortunately spend all of our fund balances last year between March and the end of the year. We weren't really bringing in much revenue, and we still did have the expenses related to paying people and those types of things. So we did utilize all that money and a little bit more, less than $10,000 more that we had to transfer to that fund. But you can see, but I'm happy to tell you that we are working toward reestablishing a fund balance in food service. And if you look at the financial statements, you'll see that we're starting to have revenues exceed expenditures for the first couple months of the fiscal year. Debt service, don't worry about that. Basically, when we sold our bonds for the new school, we were given a premium from the bondholders. Just it's an accounting thing that they wanted to do, and so they gave us a little bit more money, and then we had to pay them back in the first payment. So nothing to worry about there. And if you want to know more, I can talk to you about it. But that's why the fund balance went down so fast in the debt service fund. Oh, I'm sorry. And then capital projects funds, that's building Forest Edge. And you can see last year was the major year that we were spending money to build the building and pay the contractors, as well as some land purchases that were in there as well. So these are just some real quick line graphs that kind of show you where we spend our money. This is general funds and debt service fund expenditures. You can kind of see the instruction is obviously our largest expenditure each year, and how that's grown. It flattened off, or even went down a little bit last year, simply because the end of the year was a little bit different than what we anticipated it being. Support kind of leveled off and went down as well a little bit, just a touch. And then you can see that the debt service payment went up. That's again related to what I talked about with the expenditure for the bonds that we had to give back to the bondholders that they had given us in the prior year. And then pretty flat on non-program services and a little bit touch up on open capital outlay. These are the revenues and include special education. You can see that I always talk about we're kind of a two-income family, if you would, between property taxes and state aids. And you can kind of see in this situation, which was interesting to me when I looked at it, the state aids, if you add the the special education categorical reimbursements and those types of things, which actually last year and this year are starting to go up a little bit. Actually, the state, if you add all the state resources together, it actually outpaces our local property taxes. That's what local means, a little bit, and has grown a little bit over the last couple of years. All the other revenue sources that the district have are really not significant. They're important, but not don't make up a large amount of the money that we have in our budget. This is a simple analysis that our auditors always do. We have a statutory debt limit that we have that we can't go above. And you can kind of see that we did pop up a little bit when we got Forest Edge approved, and we're starting to obviously pay that principal off. And so that's why there's a downward slant. As our assessed value grows, that's what our debt limit is based off, is the percentage of debt of our equalized assessed value. And so you continue, as our assessed value goes up, our debt limit goes up as well. And we're well within that range. That's really a brief report from our audit. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
I'll walk through some of the board members. Tim, anything?
Just quick, Andy, all the FES funds have been distributed now, is that right? We don't have any outstanding things to pay for?
Actually, no, we still do have revenues, a balance in that account. And we still have one project that will extend into next year related to taking our fiber to the Muffin network. I've talked about that a little bit in the past. And we're still we just got about $1 million request for payment from Findorf just last week. So we are still paying out expenses related to that as we commission the building and kind of go through all the punch lists and everything. The majority of the monies are gone, but we still do have a little bit of money left.
Okay. Second question is about the school home construction. That home has been sold, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. We still have one lot that would still be in that number that we showed there, next to the two lots that we've sold, but that lot was sold. I'm sorry, that final house was sold. And then this year we're working with Tim O'Brien on a house actually not far from your house.
So we're actually not holding uncertainty in that the way we have in the past anyway.
You are correct.
That's comforting to know that we're actually working on a home that is being funded and generaled by Tim O'Brien as opposed to holding that ourselves.
You're absolutely correct. It does reduce my stress level a little bit.
It's my understanding that's likely going to be sold early in 2021. Are we going to start on something so that second semester kids in that program are going to have something to do on site?
Your understanding is the same as mine. I'm not sure if Mr. Pleiner's here, if they have another project lined up. I see his icon there.
I am here. There is, the block schedule compressed the construction crew down. There may be some additional opportunities for students to be involved in some projects locally, but we're tying this one up kind of right on the time frame that we allotted for, given this new partnership.
Great, very good. Obviously, we have some hopes and plans for our environmental center that could be a great opportunity for those classes. And so let's just keep that in mind as well.
Sounds good.
Thank you both. No other questions.
Troy, welcome back.
So no real questions on the budget. I guess I just wanted to accentuate a note in the text, noting to grow the fund balance in order to keep it proportional to the budget. And, we think we've been talking a lot about that over the past several cycles, particularly with regard to the carryover amounts. And, that's kind of the method that we've used to provide that cash flow throughout the year. So I just kind of bring that up as it's something that I think we'll need to be talking about as we begin the next budget cycle planning here. So I don't know, Andy, if you have any reaction to that or initial thoughts to get the thought process moving.
I don't have anything significant. I will say that as we work through the year, we haven't, my original fear was that we were going to use a lot of that funding to continue to pay food service employees. We've been able to, because of the federal government, their change related to food service, it's really helped us. We still are paying some food service people out of the food service operations, and that's coming from that 1.5 million. But my hope is that there will still be a little bit of money left over. Again, it really depends on kind of our plans from now until the end of the school year and how those translate. But there might be some money left over so that we can grow the fund balance even with that this year. We'll just have to see how that plays out. But yeah, having some intention into the future to grow that just at least proportional so that we continue to have enough money to cash flow is a nice thing to be able to say and to prove to our rating agencies that we've kind of done what we said we would in policy.
Great. Thank you. Nice job on the report.
Anna?
Troy stole mine, so I wish you would have called on me first. Just kidding. I had the same comment about watching that fund balance and seeing what might need to be done to get that to be able to keep us from having to borrow when we get to those tight times of the year. And really, that was my only other comment. I guess I would just give one compliment. I mean, this is a huge budget, and the report really identified no issues and recognized that we really have really great people working on this in our finance office. And so a huge thank you to Andy and your team for the great work on this.
Thank you.
Krista?
Like Anna said, Tim had one of my questions and so did Troy, but I do have one follow-up in terms of food service, because that's been you've been keeping your eye on that. We've kind of been some different places this year. I guess my question is, the federal money that we're using, is that good through the end of this school year? Is that what you said?
It's actually good through September 2021.
Okay, so that was my question for summer school.
Yep,
So we're
we
good.
should be able to do summer school, no problem. We probably will end it though at the end of August because it would be confusing for our parents, assuming we're back in traditional school, for that to continue and that type of thing. But yeah, at least through next August for sure.
Okay, great, thank you. And again, my kudos to you and Kara and your team. We do not take for granted a good audit report, so thank you.
You bet.
Heather.
Krista took my question to the theme of the night, so I'm all set.
Okay, Kevin?
Nobody took any of my questions. I just have a comment that it's been helpful going through the process, being a new board member, and obviously having been involved in budgets with the company I run for many years. Clean audits are not easy to come by, so really fantastic work in a challenging year. Andrew, to you and your team.
Thank you.
Yep. And that was my comment too. This is just a terrifically strong report, both in terms of us having clean operations and unqualified audit report, and then I hope people recognize how strong financially our district is in right now, notwithstanding some pretty tough times. So I think we're facing a interesting biennial budget coming up, but we're at least in good position at the beginning of that to go forward. So I was interested, one thing I noted I've been looking for is that we have $175 million worth of capital assets, buildings, and that's and they're in great shape too. So and the fund balance, 20 years ago when we adopted that on Andy, we were borrowing $3 million a year to meet operational needs. And there's a delicate balancing in terms of how much to set aside for that to keep the percentage just right. And you've nailed it right on the button for the last 10 years. So congratulations.
Thank you, Steve.
The recommendation is to accept the audit report and also the fund balance report. So I'd entertain a motion to that effect.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Tim, I'll second that.
Second. Any further conversation from any board member? Seeing none, would you call the roll, Katie?
Mr. Pankratz,
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Maring,
Yes. The reports are accepted. Thank you, Andy, and thank your team on behalf of the board.
I will. Thank you.
All right, that takes us to discussion items, committee reports, policy. Anna, anything to report?
The only thing to report is that we have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, January 5th. I believe it starts at 5:30 p.m. And so that will be our next meeting.
Terrific. Visioning, Troy.
Yeah, so we met, well, we had a full board meeting. It was our book discussion of the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. That was last week, December 7th. And that was part of the district's work on racial equity and the anti-hate speech policy implementation. And incidentally, this month in December, the district is beginning or continuing the work in the classroom on implementing that policy on the educational front. Our discussion really focused on the educational equity, and we use that book to provide a bit of a historical perspective and to help us focus our discussion on equity in our schools, and specifically the board's role in advancing the equity in our district. A couple of action items that came out of that. We've continue to recognize that we need input from various social and economic groups. And so we've had some discussion about how best to gain that input in a real and meaningful way. And there will be some policy review in that regard that'll go through our policy committee. We know that that since we work as a policy governance board, that's the best way to make a lasting impact. Secondly, strategic planning. There will be an equity arm to the strategic plan. That work continues. And then lastly, we will continue our work with another book reading second semester. And we'll be working to select that title here shortly and continue our work on this item. And that's all. We, in terms of other vision steering committee meetings, we don't have anything scheduled at this time, but we do have some items on the backlog that we'll be tackling in January.
Thanks, Troy. Any questions for Troy or Anna? I don't see any thanks. That was a really enjoyable a session that we had working through the application of that book to our district. So thank you to the visioning committee for facilitating that and working us through it. So, okay, that takes us to information items. Opening a school update, medical working group update, equity update. And Dr. Bergstrom, I assume you're going to address this as you have done in the past through a single presentation, and then we'll follow in our normal procedure after that presentation with board comment or questions. So the floor is yours, Dr. Bergstrom. I can't hear you. If you might want to unmute.
I certainly do want to unmute, so thank you.
There you go.
This evening, we will talk about our student support plans, phased restart status in semester 2, how we're going to work together to stay in school, as now we're approaching when we will be in school, survey results, the medical working group update, and then action steps related to a lot of the things that are going on right now. So, as we know, our goal is to have students back in school, and I think we are definitely starting to see a light at the end of that tunnel. Now, related to our support services that are ongoing, you can see on the side of the screen in orange or with an orange backdrop, all the things that have been happening, and then on the white side of the screen, the things that are new since the last time. For example, we have administered the behavioral, emotional, social traits screener to our families of students in grade 3. And this is a screener that allows parents to give their input related to the needs of their child as they see them. So that is something that the parents fill out, and it goes directly to the student services staff at the school for follow-up. We have been following up on our students who are in grades 5 through 12 and the survey that we sent them in mid-November, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. That survey has resulted in additional groups coming from student services, small student groups facilitated by our counselors, school psychologists, social workers, etc., regarding stress and coping with stress and increased opportunities for social interactions with their peers. And finally, students are really learning self-advocacy, coping strategies, and healthy habits. And that is specifically, I'll give you a couple examples later on, but that specifically is coming from student services reps, counselors, for example, who are checking in on students based on the results of this survey and have been really impressed by students and their self-advocacy and the way that they are coping with the stress that they're experiencing in the world right now. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically I want to say that our student services staff are really impressed with our students and all they're doing as far as their life and keeping everything going as smoothly as it can despite these difficult circumstances. Community transmission, this is the latest from public health. You can see that there are some communities in Dane County that have a rate of transmission higher than the Dane County average. Fitchburg is the only part of our community that falls into that particular category. Related to our dashboard, I think it's really, honestly, very good news. If you look at the Friday, December 11th dashboard, you'll see that numbers for the last week or the last 2 weeks since you were able to see it continue to decline. So we are definitely reflecting what's happening in the community. And for now, that is a positive thing. So happy about that. And then this is probably the last time you'll see this slide because at about 4:30 today, Public Health of Madison-Dane County released updated school guidance. And the school guidance is no longer attached to a metric. And as I said, it was just released at 4:30 today. So we still have a lot of analyzation and planning to do related to the contents of the recommendations or the requirements and the recommendations. But as you see from this quote here, Public Health of Madison and Dane County is relying on the latest science and is stating that schools can operate safely and effectively when strong infection control measures are in place. And that if schools decide to open, which we certainly will here in Oregon, they recommend a phased approach beginning with elementary schools first. So as I said, this just came out today, so we still need to review it for detail. But it very much aligns with our original idea of a phased in-person schooling implementation approach. But please know that our commitment to safety and monitoring community spread remains, and as does our alignment with the guidance of public health, because everything that we will be doing in the next month to get our schools reopened will be in alignment with their guidance. And their guidance at this point has 6 different requirements, all of which we feel very confident that we already have in place, and 5 different recommendations. And I'll certainly talk about that more later after we've had an opportunity to really dig into the document. Because while I was anticipating the document would state it is safe for grades 3 through 5 to open, that is really all of the information that we as superintendents in Dane County had been given related to the contents of the plan. We had a strong idea that the metrics were going away and that 3 through 5 would be the next step. That's really all we knew. And the timing was somewhat unfortunate because at first we expected the new updated guidance at the beginning of December, which would have been very helpful to have prior to sending information out to families and asking them to make a second semester choice. However, once the first week of December came, what we then heard was perhaps we wouldn't be getting the updated guidance until the beginning of the new year, meaning early January. So that is what caused us to move forward with our plan to ask families about second semester, foreshadowing the fact that we believe the next step was grades 3 through 5, followed shortly thereafter by grade 6. But public health was responsive to the concerns of the school districts that said we need more time with your updated guidance in order to make sure that families have all the information they need to make semester 2 choices, and our staff have the information they need to make semester 2 plans. So here is an updated version of our reopening status. You'll notice that the January 19th date for grades 3 through 5 no longer says tentative after it. And there are only 3 school days between January 19th and January 25th when we intend to bring in grade 6. However, as grade 5 at RCI will be more students than any of our grades have phased in at any one time yet this school year, we want to have a few days to ensure that our entry and exit procedures and all of the other important safety procedures are where they need to be before we double the number of students in the building. So that's why we're taking a couple of days in between the implementation of the 3-5 and the grade 6 plan. Now, grades 7 through 12, I know that many people do not want to see the TBD underneath that, but that's simply because the guidance came at 4:30 this afternoon. And we haven't had time to look as a team at the guidance and establish our timeline for the remaining grades. Now, in addition to establishing a timeline, a draft timeline we believe is reasonable, we will also then take that timeline to the medical advice or medical working group to get their professional input on considerations. So we have a lot of work to do in the next week or so to ensure we have a timeline that our families can count on. So for grades 4K through grade 2, those of you who have children in this age grouping, you'll already know what we're proposing or what we are continuing. And you know that Oregon Online remains a fully viable option for families who aren't ready to be in person in school. Grades 3 through 5, they will be following a similar structure. Now, what is really important to note, and if you have a child in K through 2, you already know this, is that the in-person time is very focused on English language arts and math instruction. and that the time that is either a recorded lesson or other types of asynchronous activities, that happens the time opposite when you are in your in-person times. However, for grade 3 through, or for grades 5 and 6, a lot of their lessons that are opposite their in-person time will be synchronous. So they'll be interacting in real time with their teachers of classes like art, world language, etc. So students will have a full day and half of it will be in person. And I know many people are thinking, why half day? Why not full day? Well, part of that is because the recommendation that's coming from public health is still recommending 6 feet of distancing. And we really believe that, of course, the first reason for K through 2 operating successfully without transmission in schools, the first reason is consistent mask wearing. But I would say the next reason we haven't had a lot of in and out of the school building with many students on quarantine for exposure to other students is because we have been able to implement the 6 feet of distancing. And the 6 feet of distancing is what makes the half days a really important part of what we're doing. So when you add the masks with the 6 feet and the other safety measures we have in place, we believe we're providing a really safe environment. And we have evidence of that with our 4K through 2 grade levels not having incidents of student or staff to student transmission at school. In addition, you'll see that Oregon Online remains an option for families who prefer it. And the schedule for grade 5, for the RCI and Forced Ed schedule for grade 5 and probably grade 6, because the schedules will be very similar, is on the FAQ on the website. So I encourage you to take a look if you have children who are in those grades and are anticipating their return. So as I said, grade 6 will be following the same schedule. We only want to do a few instructional days in between just to make sure that everything is going smoothly before we double the number of students entering and exiting and operating in the building during the day. We want to make sure that we have no opportunities for bottlenecks, because bottlenecks are places where you could potentially have close contact, which would lead to potentially more quarantines, etc. Now for grades 7 through 12. I've mentioned this before, as have Dr. Anderson and Mr. Pliner, and that is that there's a significant difference between elementary and secondary related to what the teachers teach and their licensing requirements. And many of you know this, so I'll go through this very briefly. But K through 6, the teachers have general licenses, which means they're able to teach any subject. Consequently, or any subject, any academic subject. No, they're able to teach language arts, math, science, social studies. I don't want to imply that other subjects aren't also academic. But because of that, the students are able to stay together in a group. And the teachers, if the teachers switch, the teacher would go into the room where the students are, as opposed to the students moving all around or intermixing groupings, which is really important when you're thinking about contact tracing. Because if you're able to keep students 6 feet apart and you're able to keep them with the same group of students all day, it's less likely to lead to a situation where students need to be in and out based on someone who may have been COVID positive. However, in the secondary realm, grades 7 through 12, our teachers have license to teach specific subjects. Consequently, they couldn't have one class in their room all day long unless all the lessons were being streamed in and the students just sat there. And that is what we don't want to do. We want students to be able to be taught in person by the academic specialists. But the consequence for that is, of course, that students will move from classroom to classroom. All of the necessary safety pieces will be in place to keep students as safe as possible as they travel from classroom to classroom, but that is a difference. And it's also important because elementary, we have specific dedicated Oregon Online teachers, separate classes with Oregon Online students. Grades 7 through 12, our teachers are teaching Oregon Online and Phase Restart, because right now those experiences aren't different. It's the same experience. Once we return to in-person, the phased restart students will be coming all morning for in-person instruction. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then in the afternoons, that is when those same teachers are working in a small group manner with Oregon Online students. So it's, of course, just one staff, and they're teaching the group A, group B, and Oregon Online, and they're keeping a lot of plates spinning. But we really strongly believe that it's the most student-centered approach, and I'll talk about that right now. You'll see that we're expecting, because all of the numbers are still coming in, our families have until Friday to make their selection related to semester 2. But we're expecting it will be similar to semester 1, where about 75% of our students are in phased restart and about 25 in Oregon Online. Our phased restart students will be separated into 2 groups, Group A and Group B, whereas our Oregon Online students will be in what we refer to as Group C. Now remember, the A and the B group is in order to have a smaller number of students in school at one time in order to ensure physical distancing and keep up all of those safety practices that have allowed us to operate successfully with the school grades that are in person thus far. Now grades 7 through 12, what they're doing is the new delivery of content will be delivered through the Google Classroom. So video lectures, screencasts, etc. Now, for the students who are in phased restart and they're coming in person, that's when we'll be able to take that new information and really work with the teachers on creating meaning for it, right? Teacher guided practices, reteaching, answering questions, doing projects, really doing the analysis and the synthesis and all of those important pieces that takes that new learning and makes it into something that students are able to make sense of and hang their hat on. Now, for the Oregon Online, they will have that opportunity also in online groups at opposite times. So while they'll have the same new content delivery, they'll be able to take that new content and really do the significant learning and analysis and application of that learning within those synchronous time periods. And we truly believe that it's through this model that we'll be able to be more student-centered, because we'll be able to use that time that's either virtual or in person to really help students understand the new material that's being delivered outside of the classroom. So for the middle school, you'll be able to see that Group A would come on Mondays and Thursdays, Group B on Tuesdays and Fridays. And you may ask, why is Wednesday still an asynchronous day? Well, if you look at the schedule that teachers are working on, are working with students, you'll see that they're with students the vast majority of the day with not as much prep time as they probably need to be able to operate the different groups of students simultaneously and well. Consequently, Wednesdays become a really important day because our teachers are doing a lot. And I know many of you have expressed concerns about making sure that we don't put too much on teachers, and your concerns are very appreciated. And we are always trying to work to find ways to give teachers the time they need to be able to do all that you're seeing on the screen well. And thus far, they have been amazing. The high school, you'll see once again, Group A, Group B, and the Group C, just like the middle school. And the online group has synchronous time with their teachers in the afternoons, whereas the phase restart has synchronous time with teachers in the morning. So now that we know we're coming back together, we want to be able to actually stay in school, and that will take all of us doing certain things to ensure that we are remaining safe. So for the students and the families, before school every day, completing the daily home screening checklist is very important, because if you have any of the symptoms on the screening checklist or a combination of the symptoms, staying home is the safest thing to do for yourself and for the school community. Certainly stay home if you have a fever 100 degrees or higher and any of the symptoms. When you are in school, bring your backpack to carry all your items, because we will not be utilizing lockers. And bring a water bottle, because we will have individual water bottle stations or water filling stations as opposed to drinking fountains. Once students and staff are at school every day, they'll be wearing a mask. We will be keeping our 6 feet of physical distance at all possible times. We know there are times when it isn't possible, but it is possible most of the time. We won't be sharing supplies, and we will, of course, be taking all the proper hygiene breaks. And should there be positive cases at school, and we absolutely expect that there will, because school reflects the community, we'll follow the processes and protocols to determine the impact on the classrooms and the schools. And we certainly have the medical working group to assist us in things like establishing metrics for the closing of a classroom due to positive cases or something of that nature. So what will be the safety preparations and protocols? Well, for our grade 6 and younger, they'll have cohort assignments. They'll be together in small groups. Grades 7 through 12, they'll have larger group assignments versus the smaller cohorts. And when we say larger group assignments, it would be half of phased restart coming into the building. We've done a lot of work with our ventilation, air filtration systems. Our buildings are in excellent operating condition and are meeting all of the requirements that are necessary for safety. We will have some modified traffic flows and entrances, and all of these things are things that the medical working group had some opportunities to give us input on also. So we're adhering to their advice in this instance too. As required by public health, we'll have a dedicated illness isolation room, increased cleaning, definitely have increased safety signage around the buildings, and we're limiting all non-essential visitors. In addition to that, with transportation, there are more things to consider, and we've been planning for quite a while. And with parents filling out their selections for semester 2, we're setting up new drop-off and pickup locations so that we are making sure that everybody who wants to be in school and utilize transportation is on the bus route. We'll of course have to have route and capacity modifications. However, we're still working on having just one student per seat unless there are siblings. We are still prioritizing, whenever possible, bus supervisors, and particularly to help students on the bus not only understand the fact that face coverings are required for everyone and it's only one person per seat, but also helping them get on and off the bus in a way that maintains physical distance. And of course, windows open to increase air circulation. And if you're able to transport your child to school, that is greatly encouraged, but transportation will of course be available for the people who need it and are eligible for it. So as far as action steps for our families, you've seen this before. Review the plans and protocols, all of which are on our website. So I encourage you to take a look if you want to learn a little bit more specifically about our safety protocols, because we talk about those at a very 30,000 foot level in these presentations. Send questions to questions@oregonsd.org, and please fill out your semester 2 selection form by Friday. So what are we doing to prepare? Well, we've spoken to you a little bit about in the past about needs for substitutes and para positions, and we posted it on WeCan, Facebook, The Observer. So we had 3 new applicants in November and 2 new applicants in December. So we really do plan to ask the community for help, not just now during board meetings, but also probably sending out information to families that they're able to pass along to people that they might know who would make good substitute teachers. Now, we did a current survey, or a survey of our current substitutes, and we had 50 responses. Now, normally we have many more substitutes in the pool than 50. Last year we were operating at around 118. But out of the 50 who responded to our survey, and that's a good indication of who's really available for subbing. If they didn't respond to the survey, it's possible that they are not interested in subbing at the moment. But of the 50 who responded, 22 of the 50 are willing to sub in person or virtually. That's a very low number compared to what we are used to. And we are working as an administrative team to come up with creative solutions. For instance, Andrew mentioned other school staff being in the room while a teacher live streams into the classroom. We've already been doing that with our K2 students. We will definitely continue to do that whenever possible. It's a great way to do it, but the sub need will be greater than that. So we are considering all things in order to attract people to doing the really good work that our substitutes do. Not only are they teaching, but they're keeping our kids safe and they're allowing us to open our schools. So the subs are extraordinarily appreciated right now. And if you know someone, please tell them that Oregon is looking for people who would like to spend time with really great kids as part of our opening process. We also plan to, as I've mentioned before, increase our nursing time because we will, of course, need more contact tracing as we significantly increase the number of students physically in school. So next steps for us are establishing our re-entry dates for the middle school and the high school, consulting with the medical working group on the new guidance that was just released from public health, and considerations for re-entry dates. Also planning to meet the social emotional needs for students integrating back to in-person instruction, because we are anticipating that for students who haven't been in school for quite a while, that will be quite the change. And we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to create a welcoming, safe environment that allows them to adjust to being back in school with lots of people. We'll also, we have been and we will continue to collect data related to grades and standards mastery, and use some of that information in planning for summer school. So as far as the winter sports update, as you know, emergency order number 10 caused us to postpone the start of our winter sports season. Emergency order number 10 is set to expire at 12:01 on December 16th. Consequently, we believe we'll be getting an update on emergency order number 10 from public health tomorrow. And once we get that information, we'll be able to give our families the information. If emergency order number 10 is lifted and we're given clearance to once again begin athletics, then students who registered for winter sports will be contacted by their coach with next steps and practice schedules. But if you remember, emergency order number 10 was not a recommendation, it was a requirement. And so really there are very important decisions, or actually there aren't that many decisions to be made related to emergency order number 10. Because if we know what to do, if it is lifted, and if it is not lifted, that means that we are continuing with things as they are, and we will wait to start the winter sports season when the order actually is lifted. I'll talk just a little bit about survey results. At the last board meeting, we discussed the student survey for grades 5 through 12 and the check-in requests. And Student Services has now checked in with students who answered the maybe or the yes. And in addition, have worked with or checked in with any student whose responses indicated high levels of worry or anxiety, because some of the questions on the survey really were measuring students and their social, emotional, and mental health needs at the moment. So what have they been doing? Well, as I've mentioned, they followed up with all students who requested a contact. Many of the students were already engaged with Student Services, as they have a long list of students that they are regularly in contact with, either in small groups or one-on-one, to provide the support that students really need right now. And when our Student Services staff, which would include social workers, school psychologists, school counselors, and even administrators were able to pitch in when they really knew the students well. But when they called for follow-up, the responses were very unique to the individual student. So it's challenging to come up with something broad that applied to all of the students, because what they wanted to share was very unique to their circumstances. Sometimes they were sharing stress about the pandemic and world events. Sometimes they wanted to talk about completing schoolwork and the number of assignments they were doing. And for the younger students, because we had more, if you remember, fifth graders saying they wanted someone to contact them. Some of the younger students wanted to share a joke or an idea for a new club, and really just thought, seemed to think that it would be nice to connect with somebody. So it wasn't really about their stress or worry, it was about, it would be nice to make this connection. Now, the supports were very personalized for the individual student. When speaking with, for example, the neighborhood teams at the high school, and the neighborhood teams are comprised of a principal and a school counselor who work together on a group of students and monitoring their needs and providing their supports. The supports were highly personalized based on the conversations they had with students. And oftentimes that neighborhood team would also get together with the students' teachers and talk about what they collectively could do to support the student in whatever their needs were at the moment, whether it was academics or it was anxiety. So all of the people who knew the students well were coming together to create a plan that worked for that individual child. The other survey that we recently gave out was our staff survey. So I just want to share with you some very high level themes related to what the staff see is working very well. The real-time interaction was something that the staff commented on many times over regarding how much that is helpful to our students. And that, of course, is leading to the relationships and the connections with teachers. And the students really need and want, and that it's recognized by the teachers how well it works when the students have social connections through clubs and activities. And we are operating almost all of our clubs in the virtual environment. And it's really an important piece of supporting kids and providing them with what they need. The small groups and the learning hubs and the one-to-one meetings were mentioned as what's working well. And also the independence and responsibility. And I'll get to a little anecdote on that when we talk about challenges, because of course there are challenges too. The virtual teaching requires different approaches. It requires people to learn things that they have never learned before, and they have risen and gone beyond that challenge. Online learning, there's always the potential for distractions and concern over engagement when you can't always see the students' faces, because very often they're turning off their cameras. And then of course, technology challenges. As an anecdote, I was able to be in a 4th grade class where all of the 4th graders had their cameras on, and it was lovely to see their face. And they were making themselves cozy wherever they were to make sure that they were ready for their learning. But when I spoke with the teacher afterwards, you know, settling in, getting their comfortable spot, that's a part of the interaction within the regular classroom also. But one of the things I noticed that I really wanted to comment on, because I'm hearing it from teachers also, and that is the high level of independence and responsibility that students are assuming, and assuming really well. For instance, when there were technology glitches, students were problem solving their own technology solutions, and they were reaching out and helping others. So when someone was having a hard time, for example, with their microphone, another student was offering a suggestion or chatting a suggestion. They were coming together to help solve one another's problems, because the teacher couldn't be right next to the student telling them exactly how to solve the problem. And so it was actually kind of a terrific thing to see. Certainly we don't want to have this type of virtual environment. That's not our choice, it's not our wish, but it is nice to see the independence and responsibility that some of our students have been able to cultivate in this environment. So when we asked staff, how do we continue to support you? Of course, they said continue to demonstrate support by checking in, allowing time for personal self-care during this time of really heavy workload, along with the stress that all of us, including those of you at home, are feeling related to COVID. They also want us to continue with the clear and transparent communication, continue to address the questions as they arise, and to continue to follow health guidance. And of course, they want us to continue to acknowledge the fact that this is hard work and there's a lot of time and effort being spent. And knowing that managing multiple modalities is very difficult. And they've also appreciated the focus on the essential standards. So they're able to be narrow and deep in some of their instruction. And that is something they definitely want to be able to continue as we move forward. And then there were lots of positive works of thanks, positive comments and words of thanks, as we've been working very well together as a collaborative team throughout this time period. So related to surveys and action steps, I would say that We want to continue to support the student needs, much as we have been doing, and we have been adding additional supports like the groups I spoke about earlier. For staff, we want to continue to look for opportunities for real-time interaction with their students because the students need it and the staff love it, and to continue to show support for their efforts, all that they are doing. The medical working group. This has been an absolutely wonderful addition to our, I don't know, I say OSD family, right? Because we're all working together for the common good. And the people who were willing, all of the people who volunteered to do this wonderful service and work on the medical group are very appreciated. And some of the things that they asked us to consider after we shared our reopening safety protocols with them is they spoke about balancing the mental and physical impacts, school and community knowledge and engagement, how it's important that we all know that we're in this together, the importance of timely contact tracing and the logistics of that, to know the data specific to Oregon students and families, to really truly understand the risk that students are at when they have less supervision. A lot of discussion on how younger students are less likely to spread the virus and the importance of routine and reinforcement for safety protocols. We've spoken about equity concerns related to the impact of the pandemic on our families and the need for flexibility and creativity with the school structure. So we've had 2 meetings thus far. The first one was an introduction meeting and establishment of norms and goals. The second meeting was when the group reviewed and shared feedback on our school plans. And our next steps, we have a meeting 1 week from today. We did plan on focusing on mental health supports for students as more grades are phased in, and we still may be able to touch upon that. However, the updated public health guidance that was released today will probably become the next important topic, and the next meeting may then move to mental health supports for phased restart students and students who continue to be in Oregon online. So, final topic, and that is an update related to equity in our student, staff, and family education plans, our anti-hate speech policy implementation, and curricular review. So what are the action steps that have happened since the last time that we spoke? Well, as far as how we are implementing our equity plan, we knew that this school year, even before we were aware of the level that we would be dealing with the pandemic, we knew that this upcoming school year would be a time when we would focus on community education and focus in on elevating the voice of our students. And we have been implementing that or working toward that implementation throughout this year. So we've had the second of our community engagement sessions. 113 Oregon community members attended the December 1st forum sponsored by Nehemiah. We've had continued staff education as part of our professional learning pathways in service. And on January 18th, we'll have continued professional development related to equity. Our anti-hate speech implementation, as you know, that has been planned for quite a while, and our task force met many times this summer and had another meeting on December 2nd to give feedback on the student lessons related to the implementation of the policy. So we've been, in addition to that, we've been meeting with student groups, which has been quite an inspiration to meet with students representing the Gay Straight Alliance, the Multicultural Student Union, and the Allies in Action Group. We've had 2 early morning meetings with them thus far, and they plan to take an active role in education related to equity issues and in the anti-hate speech policy. And of course, the student lessons that we have been referring to are in process. The first ones are focusing in on identity and what makes you who you are. The curriculum review, we're creating lessons on the educational standard of diversity, which is what's coming up next after we work on identity. And the lesson delivery for that will begin during the semester 2 time period. So that's a lot. And now I'd love to hear what questions or thoughts the board has related to all of this information.
I'll give you a chance to have your voice arrest. Thank you, Leslie. So we go back. Just a couple of timing things from our end. Obviously, Dane County, or Public Health, Dane County, Madison surprised us by coming out with that today. We were thinking it was going to come later. So you're still digesting that. But before that had come out, we had been talking, Dr. Bergstrom and I touched base with a couple board members. Our next board meeting is January 11th, and things are going pretty rapidly right now. And my suggestion is that we meet sooner than that. Now, the surveys come back on the 18th, which is this Friday, and then the medical group is meeting on the 21st. And in between then and during this week, I'm assuming Dr. Bergstrom and the staff will be working on some of the open issues in terms of the when, particularly with 7-12, and also with 6, and then the hows. And so I'm suggesting, board, that we get together again as a board on December 22nd, which is the week from tomorrow. Okay, and solely on the reopening stuff, they get additional information and plans from Dr. Bergstrom and a chance to feedback on that. We'll provide Dr. Bergstrom with our feedback tonight, but my thought is that we give that feedback tonight. She's going to get information on Friday and on Monday, and then we get a report and have a further discussion on the bringing our students back, and we do that on the 22nd. Is there anybody who cannot make the 22nd? You're good, Tim?
I am.
Okay. Yeah, I think I checked with most of you. Okay, so we're gonna schedule a regular meeting, not a regular meeting, a special meeting for December 22nd at 6:30. The only agenda item on that night will be to get a report and an update on the return to school issues. Okay, and Dr. Bergstrom, I'm assuming that date's okay with you.
Yes.
Okay, and that time frame's okay with you? In
Yes.
terms of being able to consolidate stuff and get a report to us?
Yes.
Okay, so that's sort of a background so that we stay diligent and timely with stuff. And if we need to meet after that and sooner than the 11th, we will do that. So I'm going to go through in reverse order then where we left off. And so that means, Kevin, you're up first. Feedback for Dr. Bergstrom or questions?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Bergstrom, for the presentation, all the work that's gone in with all the administrators. Quite an abrupt change from Dane County and interesting timing. As someone had mentioned, with little prep time for the next semester. But the good news is that the stance was changed, and some of the stances and the input from the CDC and others has been listened to. So that's encouraging for sure. I've said often, and we know in general, for those that have been on boards before, typically board members are focused again on the what, and the school district in this case is focused more on the how. And I watched the video a couple times online. Thanks for all the prep work that was done. It was relatively clear, but I have a few questions. And the first one is just kind of a general question, and the thought process behind, if we just focus on 7-12 at this point, of not having kids be in school for a full day. And I understand what you said about the half days, but you have twice the number of people coming through the facilities, twice the amount of traffic. And I know, again, I've talked, I'm from a big family, many educators in the family, and what I've heard has been working in places where they're not fully back 5 days a week, where that is the case in some districts. Is full, like rotate 3 days this week, and then the following week could be on 2 days, and the rest of the time would be live stream. So maybe you could comment on the thought process on why what I would call a much simpler process for both the kids, a safer process from what I perceive, because there's less traffic through the schools, and what I would also imagine would be easier on the teachers, and then we could actually teach on Wednesdays, because they would be live streaming when they're not, so they'd be live streaming for the kids that are not in that rotation that I was describing.
Thank you. We did research the live streaming option, and Mr. Planner actually visited some schools that were doing exactly that. And so, Mr. Planner, if you'd like to speak to that a little bit, because you're the person who has the firsthand knowledge related to it, and your team really made some of the decisions related to not moving to the live stream model.
Yeah, what we found was that, and as we mentioned in the video, that the live streaming created, we have distancing and density issues that we need to appreciate and make certain that we have safe distances in the classroom setting. And so what we observed was classrooms of 9 kids and teachers that were masked up, where they were trying to stream to 15 kids live on camera while simultaneously meeting the needs of students in front of them. And what that created was a really difficult experience for students at home to hear what was happening in the classroom, and then to really, it reduced much of the teaching. We've learned a lot about virtual learning, and it really would limit the benefits of virtual learning while encouraging some of the worst teaching practices, which is reducing to a live stream lecture. And in a block where we're looking now at 85 minutes, it would feel like, it would feel not quite as effective as making certain that we leverage the time that we're with kids in the most productive fashion. If we are having students engage in hearing lecture, we can deliver much of that through an asynchronous means. And then when we are together, we're applying that learning, we are reinforcing it, we are able to assess where student gaps exist, and then to provide them with really in-person high leverage support. We also know, and I'll cut it off because Kevin, it might be more than where you're bargaining, but we also acknowledge that, we are asking our teachers to serve that group in the Google Classroom, our online learners and their needs throughout the course of this year. We also knew in the fall, when we were planning for this, we were watching school districts whipsaw from being open to close to open to close. And what we decided early on was that Google Classroom would be a means for us to be very coherent in our instruction, regardless of what happens to us in terms of our format, in terms of teachers rotating in and out of quarantine, and students as well. So there's a lot of complexity, but I'm willing to listen to a deeper question if you want to push.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's definitely complex. I mean, what I've witnessed, and I'm sure you have too, with family members in different districts around the country, probably, is of course this is never going to be perfect, and we can't expect it to be. And I think Dr. Bergstrom even said that. We're not naive enough to think that there's not going to be a situation, for instance, where maybe a class has to quarantine and be out of school, or a specific, classroom. But again, I just am having a hard time understanding just the simple traffic side of things and also I guess the burden on parents too, where it's hard to plan when your kids are half day in school. So again, I know it's complicated. It's just my perception of the plan. It's very well thought out, but I think it's more my impression. Again, I'm not an expert on this, that it's more complicated maybe than it needs to be. And, tracking technology, of course, exists in these classrooms. I don't know if those were present in some of these schools that you toured, but I guess that's my only comment. Really no need for any further. I can understand where you're coming from, Jim. A couple other additional questions, specifically, and maybe Jim, you're going to have to address these as well. The 4:55, I believe it's 55-minute periods in the morning when, let's say cohort A is in that Monday morning. Are they actually getting 4 different subjects, each of those 55-minute periods?
They're going to be following their schedule. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And the students will be moving from classroom to classroom. Okay.
Yep.
And because of the way the teachers are licensed and the number of teachers, having a classroom stay. It's obviously not, you're teaching subjects. You're not teaching a 5th grade class that can stay together.
That's exactly right.
Okay. I guess the other thing I'd like to understand is it's described as planned prep production and 2 live resource sessions per working group C. Can you break that down in the kind of the afternoons when, again, I'll use the example of cohort A, and maybe you can pull up the slide if it's there.
I
Thanks,
can, yep.
Linda. Thank you. Can you help me understand what that means?
Yep. So we have our teachers have a group of students that will be, if I'm teaching an English classroom, I'm going to have a group of students that will be in my A cohort, a group that will be in my B cohort, and we'll have some students that will not be present for those live sessions. And we want to make certain that they get their live sessions as well. And we'll be providing those via a Google Meet. In the afternoons will be the opportunity for me to connect with my students that are on my class load. They will be getting a live session with me, much like what they're currently getting right now.
Okay.
And the plan prep production piece really refers to the fact, Kevin, that, you know, in the virtual learning environment, what we have learned, and our teachers have learned an amazing amount. And we met in our last faculty meeting, and we spent time really pushing forward themes that will be a part of our new normal in the future. A lot of really promising things that we've learned, and Google Classrooms are here to stay. But we've also found that in order to produce lessons that are robust in the asynchronous fashion, with screencasts and paired X and the opportunity for kids to apply their learning and to get feedback, oftentimes exceeds the runtime. So, you know, a teacher might have a lesson that runs an hour and they can spend 2 hours putting that thing together. And, you know, it really, it is, I think, across this district, it has been amazing the hours that our teachers have put in. And this acknowledges that we're asking them to continue to produce in an asynchronous fashion, high quality, high bar learning experiences. And then we're supporting kids and teaching both in live and virtual. So it's, everybody I talk to, Kevin, I say next year is going to be amazing. This year is going to be hard, and our folks are doing really, really great things. And this is it's going to be a stretch, but they're going to step it up.
Okay, I have a lot more questions, but I know there's other board members. I do have one more question I have to ask, and hopefully I've knocked off a few questions that maybe the other board members have had. But are there concerns with the amount of asynchronous learning that's going to happen and kids being self-motivated, directed, parents having to babysit's maybe too strong of a word, but there's a lot of self-sufficiency that's required for asynchronous learning. And it seems, you know, we're moving kind of towards that direction with this model. Is there any concerns about that?
I'd say there are always concerns about it, but we also have the structures to deal with it when we notice that students are starting to fall behind. And I'm also wondering about the role that our support hubs will continue to play for the students who struggle to do what they need to do in an asynchronous fashion, providing them opportunities to be at school for longer times.
Okay, thank you. I've hogged a lot of time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Kevin. Heather?
Yep, I just have a couple quick questions. Thank you, that was really helpful. I appreciate the update, and I know it's continual moving target, so no doubt a lot of time and effort from you and your team and everybody, Leslie, so thank you. I'm pleased that the 3 to 5 and then shortly after 6 is moving forward. I'm excited for those kids who opt in to do the phased restart. And I will hold my questions on 7 through 12 till the 22nd, because I think lots of things will be answered then once you've had adequate time to review and make plans. So my 2 questions are more on the student check-in piece.
Mm-hmm.
I know I was looking I don't know if you can go to that slide, that would be helpful, but the numbers of the class numbers by grade and then the numbers that replied.
I must make sure I'm going in the right direction here.
It's like
there
27
we
or
go.
8 maybe. Yeah, 28. Yeah. So obviously if 200 on grade 5, for example, if 200 people replied, you can only connect with those people. Was this all anonymous, or is there a way to figure out or connect with those that didn't reply? Or how are we, the people who didn't reply might also be the people who need additional support.
Absolutely. I'll speak especially for the high school because they have the largest number of non-respondents. And what they've done, similar, I'll go back to the neighborhood model piece. The students who didn't respond were then put on the list for the neighborhood model, the neighborhoods, the principals and the student services members to go through that list and check on the non-respondents related to the needs that they're already aware of and what needs they might not be. So they were put on the list for consideration related to what supports they needed also.
Okay, that makes sense. And then skipping ahead to the curriculum update in your equity piece, I'm really excited about that, and just had a question if it is for all grades.
It is
on the semester 2. Okay,
yes.
And then I just was curious and maybe also recommending that there might be additional communication to parents about that. I mean, just putting my parent hat on for a second, I would love to know more about that, not only so I'm in the loop, but also so I can deepen the learning with what we're doing at home.
Absolutely. And in the, I think not last week, the week before, in the family update, we sent out a link to the standards that are being used. So that would be a really good place to start. But, I also think it would be a great idea to give parents ideas on book titles, et cetera, for them to be able to utilize at home that fit with what's going on too. So yeah, I agree. We'll talk about the parent input piece.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. That's all that I had.
Krista.
Thanks, Steve. First of all, Leslie, I got to give you a lot of credit for getting this news at 4:38. You're really pretty relatively calm about it. I don't know if I would be if I got that news before I was heading to a board meeting. So I appreciate your calm, collective demeanor, because that's kind of a nice drop on you as
It was a big one.
superintendent of Dane County. It's kind of a change. So my questions first start with that. I agree with Steve about having the December 22nd meeting. I think that's a great idea, that these are really important things that really need to be decided. I'm really happy to hear that the discussion for the medical working group will kind of take this vein. I guess, and maybe this is not a question, but maybe a suggestion for review is, looking at the 3-5 date being January 19th, the 7-8 tentatively being the 25th, and then a TBD for 7/12. I think it really would help parents and help us as a board is potentially looking at why 3-5 is separate from 6, and why do we not look at 3-6 together? And I know you kind of want to do chunks of groups, and that helps us plan and learn and know what our resource needs need to be. But I would really like to understand why we cannot move with 3-6 together, and then potentially look at the 25th being a 7-8, and then get us a date for 9/12, because I think that helps us also ramp up resources. So this is a question for you and maybe for Andy, is if we know that once we get in school, we need to stay in school, and we knew 2 critical components to that are subs and nurses for contact tracing. Do we have funds available to ramp up that, or look at what we pay subs? Because as we passed policies, 565 and 566 earlier, we know that what causes us to get out of school is we don't have enough adults that we can have supervision in classrooms, or we have too many kids that are gone, or it's not safe. And so my concern as a board member in terms of, we know we're going to need nurses and we know we're going to need subs. So maybe comment on that.
I can start with the nurses piece, and that is we have 2 full-time nurses and 1 half-time nurse. And the half-time nurse is willing to increase our hours to increase our contact tracing capacity. So that part we feel confident about. Substitutes, we do need to find new and different recruitment tools, and perhaps pay is one of that. You heard that tonight in one of the letters. And we need to be able to stay competitive with the school districts around us that are trying to do the exact same thing. So that's absolutely a consideration. Andy and Gina and I are discussing that. And yes, there is funding. We could do that for a short time, but it would be also challenging to raise pay for this year and then decrease it next year. So we have to think through a lot of different considerations.
Well, and I go back to, we've had a sub issue for a long time, right?
Mhm.
That something that we really need to look under consideration, and really, as you guys assess that, come back to the board and let us know, because I don't think it is a COVID only problem. I think it's going to continue into the future. And so I would really like to look at that long-term, potentially, because, you know, we're a destination district for teachers. We could be a destination district for subs. You know, I don't know, but I
Right.
just think that that's a long-term issue that as a board, we can maybe help solve. Next question is kind of back to some of the things that Kevin was talking about. You know, I've got a recent, as a parent, I have a recent graduate of OHS and I've got a freshman. And so I guess I feel like there's maybe some misunderstanding about in-person days and how valuable that is. And Jim, maybe you can talk to this. I mean, when Erin was in high school, that was some of the model of her class, that she would listen to a lecture, and then when she was in class, it would be directed, personalized work, either groups or teachers. So this is really not a new concept unless I'm missing something.
No, we've had teachers who've been flipping instruction in a lot of ways for a long period of time. So no, I totally agree with you. And you know, I think it's really important on a larger level too. We talk about how we are looking to phase in instruction. We're looking to start where we would be with what we've shared with the board. We want to carefully look at the numbers that come as we get declaration from our online learners and our in-person. And as we become more confident with the progress of community transmission, and you know, we're looking to continue to look to align our resources in ways that could expand our in-person instruction and streamline the way in which we support our online learners once it becomes clear that things are more stable in our building and in our community. And so we're going to continue to evolve in ways that best meet the needs of our learners.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, back to Gina's comment in terms of, you know, we've got some of the best teachers in the area teaching in our school district, and you guys have done a great job with getting their input, and you guys are lifelong educators too. So I trust your judgment in what is the best delivery of education. I think the second piece to that is I want us to remember that, and which you all do, is that we still have two groups of students, in person and online. And we have to be very, very careful that we're not, as a community or as a board, disenfranchising our online students. And what I mean by that is that should be as much of our attention as getting kids back in school, is that our families that choose online. So it's just a delicate balance. And so I know you all understand that, but you know, Leslie, maybe you can talk to that in terms of, especially at the 7-12 level, when you have one teaching staff for all students. And can you talk about kind of how that's a part of this plan?
Surely. I think that we have made a lot of decisions to ensure that our Oregon Online students are receiving the same high quality education that our phased restart students will be receiving. Because I know that some districts have taken the path where their online students simply move into a virtual school, as opposed to being taught our curriculum by our teachers. And that is a decision we made very early on in this process, that we wanted to ensure the highest quality experience for them also. And that includes keeping them a part of the school district family, right? With our teachers, our counselors, connections with our administrators. And there is definitely, you know, in some levels that has an impact on every part of the decision-making process to ensure that level of quality for the online students too.
And so I guess my last point about school reopening is that, you know, as we've said from the start, we are very student-centered, but the teachers are a huge piece of this, as the community is. And so I really appreciate that throughout this, we've stayed focused on the three cogs of this system, that it's our students, it's their families, it's our teachers, which we're asking a ton of in this community. So I applaud you all on that. Lastly, as to the equity, kind of piggybacking on Heather's question in terms of curriculum review, Will, you know, I think you talked about the standards. That would be very interesting. I would love to kind of see what those are. And then I guess my question is, what is the goal or what is the assessment that you will find out once the curriculum review is done? What is your assessment tool to let you know? And does the standards drive that, I guess? And then does the curriculum review also include things outside curriculum? So we've had some instances in terms of approach to, you know, not holidays, but a Thanksgiving assignment or snacks in school. So those things that are kind of outside the curriculum, and is that included in kind of some of these practices or reviews?
Those types of discussions related to the impact on celebrating holidays in a traditional sense, as well as the impact on everybody has to bring in a snack for the whole classroom. All of those decisions have equity implications, and that we need to be thinking about that continuously. So that's been a part of our professional development from the very beginning. And I think we continue to uncover pieces that we need to re-examine because we haven't already been able to identify who might be negatively impacted. So this is never going to be something that's done, right? I think it's something that we will always be working on because of how critical it is. As far as the curricular review, we haven't started the formal process of going through all of our curriculum for the inclusion of multiple perspectives, but we have started the process in pockets, and where we decided to put our first review process was in classroom libraries. And that has been work that has been taking place over the last couple of years and has really made a significant difference. Because if any of you remember what a teacher's classroom library might have been like, it was often books that were passed from the teacher who retired, or it was books that teachers bought by, you know, big cart full at a garage sale, right? It was something that they often put together themselves with their own money. So we started a couple of years ago, and this is a big part of this process of looking at what books are offered in every single classroom. Do they represent what we want to have represented, the multiple or the inclusion of multiple characters, authors, themes, so that kids see themselves in the books, and getting rid of the ones that simply don't tell the story that we think is helpful to our kids, that sometimes tell a story that is not one of inclusion, and then purchasing books that are specific to multiple perspectives and diverse characters and authors.
Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Krista. Anna?
Sorry, trying to get unmuted here. Great presentation. Thank you so much for, as always, all the good work. I do have a couple of questions more focused on the 7 through 12 phased restart model, and just a couple of things. Obviously, with the new content being delivered in an asynchronous manner, I just feel like that may change how homework or assessments are handled to some extent. My question would be that I would have some concerns just about the opportunity for kids to ask questions, for example, when they're learning new content before going into doing homework. Maybe those are things that would be just teacher specific on how they handle that and how they deliver that. But obviously the synchronous time would allow for some of those questions. So I guess I'm just kind of asking how that might be handled a little bit differently, given this type of learning model. Is that something that's been talked about or thought about?
So Anna, there will be instruction that will be a part of our hybrid live in-person sessions. When we think about how efficient that is as well, I think is just another factor why we want to do as much of it asynchronously as possible. Anything that I teach on Monday, I'm going to have to repeat on Tuesday to my next group of kids. And it isn't always the most efficient way to go about it, but our teachers are going to be there to guide and support. Today, I was in a meeting with a group of teachers that are planning another best practices presentation at our faculty meeting on Wednesday morning. And I just hearing the exchange between them talking about how they use their asynchronous days to have one-on-one or smaller group meets with students that are the most needy, and how they simply have prioritized that work is virtually a quote that came from that interaction that leads me to believe that our teachers aren't leaving anything to chance. And that's why our grading data in many ways looks almost exactly like we would expect in any other year. And it is because our teachers are going well out of their way to make sure that they're meeting kids where they're at. And so the flexible format and some of the flexibility in the day, they've taken great advantage of. And that's one thing that does concern me slightly when we get into the hybrid mode is there will be less flexibility to simply meet with kids at will.
Yeah, I've heard concerns from folks, some parents who are saying, my kids are going to have to teach themselves now. And so I'm just wanting to address that and make sure that that's not what's happening with this model, that there's learning that's going to be required of a student at a day when they're not synchronous with their teacher, but that is all being reinforced and redone in person after they've had it introduced to them. So I feel like it could be an efficient model of learning because you've heard it once and now you're going to hear it again with your teacher and get it reinforced and have that understanding happen within the classroom. So I guess that's something I've heard from some families who have expressed concerns about the asynchronous new instruction model.
Yeah, you summarized correctly how we are viewing it, that it is a great opportunity to support kids, to directly teach the things that people are struggling with, and to support our learners, to extend that learning in new ways, hands-on, group work, discussions, rather than lecturing through a mask.
Thank you. That's helpful. My other comment would be related to the asynchronous days and whether there would be a quote unquote schedule for students. Okay, I have to watch these 4 videos, or how that information is going to be shared on those asynchronous days, as well as is there going to be a check-in? Is attendance being taken? Is there some monitoring that 10 out of my 12 kids watched the video? Or I'm just curious how that's what accountability I guess there might be on that level.
Yeah, we definitely in our best practice staff sharing sessions on Wednesday, what some of our learning will be about is the ways in which we set students up for success by helping them break down what's ahead of them. Erin Frankson, who's a new hire, is got some wonderful techniques that she uses in her biology class. Janet Fandry does some amazing things along those same lines. And I see Nate Johnson is on this call, and Nate will also have a key role in helping share how they design their lessons, but also structure their time with students to help them organize themselves for that asynchronous work. So that'll be really a huge emphasis in what we've got coming. Absolutely.
Great. So those kind of cover my questions on some of the phased restart plan. I do have a question, I guess, for Andy, maybe. As you're starting to look at transportation and bus routes, are there concerns? I mean, once we start bringing more kids back and we've got fewer kids on buses, but maybe more routes, is there any concern with regards to the transportation budget as it relates to what busing we have ahead of us once we bring more kids in?
We are looking at that. A lot of the fixed costs with the buses are already incurred, but definitely there'll be a lot more time spent in the buses with the addition of the 712 routes. So we're actually meeting with one of the bus drivers or some of the bus drivers this week to start kind of having those discussions now that this came out from Dane County. So we'll be looking at that. It won't be tremendously more expensive, but it might be slightly more expensive. And we saved a little bit of our transportation budget at the beginning of the year, so we'll kind of have to project that out.
Great, thank you. One comment with regards to equity, I guess I'm really thankful to see that there is such progress in implementing that anti-hate speech policy, as well as the education that's coming along with it within the, even within this virtual environment. So I think it's just wonderful to know that that is being prioritized and something that is so important within this district. And I really commend our leadership as well as our teachers for putting in the time to make this a priority and to allow for that within our schools. I just think it's fantastic. So thank you so much for the great work on that.
Thanks, Anna. Tim?
Most of my questions have been covered, and I think there's some great comments, great sharing of, you know, what people are hearing in other districts and how they're handling it. I just want to make sure it's my clear understanding that as long as we have a population in virtual education, we are going to be in this essentially 2 days a week for the 7 through 12 grade. We're essentially going to be in this 2 days a week for in-person instruction, 2 mornings a week for in-person instruction. Is that correct? Which means the rest of the school year. Is that correct?
Would you like to go first, Jim, and then I'll fill in the.
Yeah, I don't agree with the fact that we would be committed till the end of the school year in a half-day session. What we will do is we will carefully look at the construct of our online enrollment and then really take a hard look. Are there better and more efficient ways to deploy our resources to best serve learners? And if that means that we construct a school within a school model by stripping some allocation, the offshoot of that, Tim, is that in some high section count courses, it would be easy enough for us to create some standalone sections that are all virtual, right? When we have enough students enroll. Where we would fall into difficulty is our capstone courses, those low enrollment singleton sections that would require then for us to live stream students in. And that would be a significant change in our model, but is something that as we continue to examine the efficacy of what we're doing and we tinker within the framework we've created, we'll also consider, is there a better and more effective way to attack things at the next term?
And Jim, I really appreciate you mentioning that, and that's music to my ears. I know that, first of all, I know we have great teachers in this district. I just want to make sure that we're not just hanging on by what we've always done, that we are looking at more effective ways. I feel, you know, I'm sure it is extremely stressful for the teachers who are trying to teach 2 different groups, the same subject, plus making sure that the folks who are doing virtual school are getting the same content and getting the same digestion of the material. And I just want to make sure that we're continuing to look at a new paradigm where there is a population of kids that are they're more self-directed than others who need that in class education, and that we deliver to both. Because I feel like today, and that's why I asked, is this going to go on through the rest of the semester as long as we have a virtual population and a in-class population? Because I feel like we're short circuiting both ends. I feel like it isn't the most efficient for either, and we're standing in two separate courts here. Whereas if we have a more efficient approach to it, where we have, whether it's purchased curriculum for those high population classes, that would be virtual only, so that we can make the space for the others that need that in-person instruction, or that we have a population that frankly loves the virtual. It's more efficient and more effective for them, and that we have a way of checking in with them twice a month to make sure, or twice a week rather, to make sure questions are answered and everybody's engaged. So I'm kind of going on and on. I just want to make sure, just like you said, Jim, that we are looking for the most, not necessarily the most efficient, but the most efficient and most effective way, so that we are giving in-class instruction to our highest degree that we've always done. And at the same time, those who are in virtual learning are getting the best we can give them in virtual, the best production, the best follow-up, the best digestion of the material. So again, I know I'm going on and on. I just don't want to continue any longer than we have to in a half of what we wished we were doing in both camps, virtual and in person. So thank you for giving me the not just the hope, but the assurance that we're looking at a different paradigm here, and we want to do it in the most efficient and the most effective way. So that was one of my points. The other, you know what? I'm just going to stick with that. Everybody else has covered lots of great questions and comments. That's my most important issue.
Thanks, Tim. Troy.
All right, so stay ready, Jim. Kind of following up on that the high school sample schedule.
My friend Shannon feels neglected, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, Shannon, stay ready as well. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this right. That, the schedule that's shown looks to me very, very demanding for our teachers. There's a lot going on all week long. And I heard you say in response to Anna's question that, there's less flexibility to meet students at will. And I understand that because of, the additional separation that we're providing. But on the flip side of that, is it accurate to say that there's going to be more dedicated contact time for students because those groups become smaller and the students have a smaller group of dedicated time with their teacher, whether it's A, B, or C? And so I guess, am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, I've got no question that our staff will be working with smaller groups of kids, and they're going to be able to quickly assess what the needs are and how to push kids forward. There are elements of what, this schedule that I don't also love, that are, things that we are bridging till we can get to a time where we're able to do more and more comprehensive things. And we're enlisting the work of groups of our teachers to help us problem solve around, what ideas do we have to make the very best use of the time that we have with our kids. So we had a meeting today with a group, and I'm starting my day out tomorrow with another group of teachers to work, my AP teachers. But absolutely, and I don't have any question that our teachers are going to figure out how to carve out key moments to connect with kids that are struggling, as well as kids that, are ready for something more and need to be pushed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I've heard us say that we didn't choose the easiest model, but we chose the one that's best for all the students. And like you said, there's pros and cons with any route that we go. But it's great to hear the flexibility that you're thinking about too in the future as we get to further into the semester and as our environment may change for the better. And I just wanted to say, we are asking a lot of our teachers, and this community is grateful, and we've heard that through some of the letters that were written in tonight, and I'm hearing that all the time. So I just want to make that known whenever I can, that we are so grateful for the hard work that goes on in our schools. And then lastly, not a question, but I guess a thought for next Monday night's medical advisory group meeting. One item that I'm really interested in learning more about, and that group is going to be the best one to cover it, is when we go to in-person at the high school, middle school level, we're talking about roughly 37% of our kids in the building at one time, and they're somewhat separated, but there is interaction between. So I'm just interested to get the medical group's opinion on how that will translate, how cases will translate to quarantine and then translate to classroom closure in that environment. And I'm just so thankful that we have that medical board in place to help us with these concerns. So if that's not something that you were planning to cover on Monday night, that's something I'd like to hear more about.
It definitely is, as the new order that came out really leaves a lot of openness to when a school or a classroom is closed. And so consequently, I would really like the working group to assist us with establishing clear-cut parameters for when it's safe to do so. And they already did talk a little bit about traffic patterns in the school, knowing that people would be passing one another. And one of the things that was recommended, and this is interestingly exactly what Jim's team had come up with too, and that was not to designate hallways as one-way hallways, because in actuality, kids usually end up moving around more, trying to navigate the one-directional components of the hallway. So don't necessarily try to tell them exactly where they need to walk and what they need to do. Just, make sure everybody knows the expectation related to staying 6 feet apart.
Yeah, I just, in contrast to our K2s, I've heard that when we've had cases or suspected cases in schools, teachers have been able to say with great confidence that they had been adhering to social distancing for the 2.5 hours, of the day. And when we go to middle and high school, it's just a much different environment, and so much.
And that's why there are more students in other districts who have high schools open at the moment. That's why there are so many students in quarantine, because it's challenging when they can't all stick together and they don't follow their teacher in a line like the first graders do. So it makes everything a little more challenging.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And that's all I had, Steve.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Dr. Bergstrom and Jim. I hope through the discussion, people realize how complicated it is in this evolving time to make all these cogs fit together and to do so efficiently and educationally. And I'm really grateful that you guys have done so much work in advance now that we've got the order that's come out, that we're ready to go. I took a glance at it this afternoon. And, the operational stuff with respect to buildings and the protocol, we've already planned for that and got that in line and ready to go with that. A couple points. The new buzzwords these days seem to be synchronous and asynchronous. But we've been talking about that in this district for a long time under different words. Okay. If you go back to our papers and the stuff that we've been working with our leadership teams, we've been talking about flipping classrooms and finding best practices in teaching. And is it more efficient for a teacher to deliver the same initial content 4 or 5 times during the day when the teacher could have that on video, deliver that to the students. And then the more efficient time would be to have that teacher's time spent then working with each individuals or group of individuals on the content that they've heard. And so this is not a new concept in this district. We've been talking about this for at least a decade. And so the fact that it's being rolled out now, it's something that our teachers, at least at the high school and middle school, have been working on for a while. And I think we're ahead of other districts because we've been working on that, okay? And Jim, I'm glad to hear that you've been visiting other schools in preparation for this and looking at live streaming versus asynchronous or synchronous, which is basically flipping and coming to the conclusion that the best delivery for all is what we're doing, because that's what we've been talking about and preparing our teachers for and our students for a long time. So, I mean, it was recognizing, our talks have been recognizing a new world that's out there potentially for instructing students and how best to utilize teachers' time in terms of working with them as individuals in small groups. So, and that's what, as I understand, the plan is in terms of the synchronous and asynchronous. Along with that was an issue related to grading and transforming that, because we're in a different educational model in terms of how we deliver. We'll have to assess different. And we've talked about that for a long time, about moving from a strict grading ABC into a mastery component. And I was glad to see that slide in your deck, Dr. Bergstrom, that reflected moving that, because again, that's been on this district's radar screen for a long time. So the model that you're looking to for 712 is not new in this district. The other thing that we've talked about over time is the fact that we need to break out of this issue of the time structure that's been developed regarding school years. Okay. And I was glad to see in Dr. Bergstrom's slide that there is plans for the summer to address where we're at coming out of the COVID instructional years. In my view, and you guys have known this from listening to me for a long time, I just think a traditional school year never made much sense to me, because we ought to be on a continuous path instead of being interrupted at the end of May, beginning of June, taking 3 months off and starting in September. And I think more so than ever, there's an argument against that, you know, because we're coming out of an unusual circumstance, and there's going to be need to be some addressing where we're at, assessing, and then doing some recovery if we need that. So I encourage you to look out of the box for what we're going to do this summer. And I don't know that I would call it summer school. Why would we call it summer school? It's school. It's a continuation of this year and a beginning of next year. And so, you know, if we've got some funds allocated for COVID emergency, and we need more curriculum time during the summer, because we're either extending this year or beginning next year, whatever we have to do in the context of DPI to make that work. I mean, we'll probably have to follow their regimen, what we call it. But in my world, it's just school. That's the end, the continuation and the beginning. Okay, and so we'll, you know, I think we can use some money there. I would echo Krista's suggestion regarding nurses and substitute pay. If we've got COVID dollars from savings last year, I wouldn't hesitate to up our wages for those folks to attract them this year, and we'll worry about next year. Okay. I'm just checking my notes. That's all I had for that. Anything that anybody say, raise any other questions that any other board member has? Krista.
Just have one other quick question for Leslie. I know, and Jim, maybe you've seen this too from other schools you've been to that are in session, or I've heard it from districts, or it's been in research, that as students go back in school, And I know we have the home checklist every morning. There seems to be a pressure about being in school, or as sports start, I got to be there even though I may have symptoms. So I guess my question is, have we thought about, and as well as, wanting to provide it, that's not the only reason, but testing sites on site at certain schools, or, how we're going to kind of help students not feel that peer pressure?
That's actually one of the recommendations in the public health document that came out today, is as testing becomes more available, our recommendation is to implement a school-based testing strategy. And Gina's been in talks with courts on that issue already too. So we've been initiating discussions related to it because we see the same advantage that you do.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one quick final comment based on really Troy's comments related to thanking the teachers and staff. I generally try to express my appreciation every opportunity that I have on the tremendous amount of work and the great effort of all of the teachers and staff in our district. And I didn't do that this time, so I'm glad that I have the opportunity to just say thank you to our teachers and our staff. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. That's it.
Thanks, Anna. I think we all share that same sentiment. Anything else? Okay, so the battle plan going forward is, Dr. Bergstrom, you've got a lot of work to do in the next 8 days with that, including looking at the new order and pulling together the survey information and working with the medical group. And then we'll see you next Tuesday on this topic to get a plan from you in terms of where we're headed. So,
Yes.
All right. That takes us to information item E4, which is the school board election update. Were you going to say something about that, Dr. Bergstrom or Gina, or whose is that?
We did not discuss that because I think that we thought that was something that someone else was discussing.
I can take that, Steve. I can
Go
take
ahead,
it if you want me
Krista,
to.
you've got that because you're the clerk and in
Okay.
charge of these things from our end.
So there are 2 seats up on the election docket. One is Area 1, which is the Village of Oregon, which Steve has indicated that he is retiring from.
Thank you.
And then Area 3, which is currently Troy's seat. And Troy, I don't know if you'd like to comment in terms of your plans.
Yeah, so I do intend to run for re-election, and as a school board member, it's important to consider the needs and voices of all students and families, as well as our teachers and staff and the community of taxpayers who depend on us for fiscal responsibility. And I'll continue to be professional, thoughtful, and inclusive in my second term as we get through this extraordinarily difficult time and further challenge ourselves to deliver an exceptional educational experience for every student in the Oregon School District. So that's what I plan to do.
Thank you. So as Steve mentioned earlier, anyone that is running for any of those seats has the opportunity to submit a statement before the board that is read one time. And then the way we look at elections is since there are 1 seat for each, if there are more than 2 candidates that run, that would require a primary, which would be February 16th. Otherwise, if it's just 2 candidates per seat, that election would be April 6th. And then Katie, what is the date for papers that are due?
They are due January 5th to the district office by 5 p.m.
Gina, did I miss anything?
You did a great job. The only thing I would add is that the board members who are running for a certain area must live in that area, but Oregon School District voters vote for all candidates.
Great, thank you. That's a really important reminder. So everybody in our district votes for each seat. Thank you. That's it.
All right, thank you. Superintendent's report, Dr. Bergstrom.
Terrific. First, I want to address the attendance concern that was brought up in one of the letters today. And I know that I've already addressed it with the board, but I want to make sure that other people listening know also. And that anytime there is a concern with attendance, it's addressed immediately. So as soon as that was brought to our attention, the principal and the teacher and I collaborated in understanding what happened. And it was an absence from an afternoon enrichment group. which up until that point had not been something that we were taking attendance on. We take attendance in a very strict protocols within our classes, but at that point we weren't taking attendance in afternoon groups that weren't required. However, this was a really excellent reminder that perhaps that even if it's not a required session, it would still be important to take attendance, and we have modified all of our protocols to allow us to do so. So I just wanted to make sure that that information was shared. Related to one of our donations, I wanted to say another thank you to Oregon Pharmacy. They had the $653 donation, and it came from people in the pharmacy giving change as they were up at the cash register. And so I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the people who went to the pharmacy, perhaps for a whole other reason, and decided to give a donation to the school district. And that with that money, we were purchasing additional masks and the raised garden beds that are a part of a healthy lifestyle that we want to be promoting at Forest Edge. So I just wanted to say thank you, because anytime our community pitches in to do things for our kids, it warms my heart, and I know it does the rest of you. And speaking of a warm heart, I want to say that another shout out to our staff, because the people who have been in person up until this point have really paved the way for being able to smoothly transition in the other grades. Because the people who went first were the ones who were helping to design and implement the protocols, who served on a lot of committees to make sure we were doing things right and doing them consistently. And then they were the ones in there from the very beginning with the students. And that's the 4K through 2 teachers, our special education teachers, our teachers who were providing in-person labs at the high school levels, the people who were doing the support hubs at the school buildings. All of those people who were willing to jump in early related to in-person learning, what they contributed is going to help us immensely as we phase in the next group of students. So I just wanted to say thank you to them, because I appreciate all that they did to make that happen for our youngest kids. And now what they learned will make happen for the older ones too. And so that concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you, Leslie. That takes us to closing future agenda. Right now, we'll have a meeting next week, and the agenda will be related to the school opening issues. So, and then Leslie and I will work on the January 11th as we move forward. Okay. We were going to have a longer break, but this is an unusual year, and we will meet as often as we need to make sure that we address issues that are related to the education of our students. All right, checkout before we move into a closed session. Troy, anything? Tim?
No.
Anna? Krista? Heather? Kevin?
Sorry, I'm going to break the trend here. One question. I know, Leslie, that you had talked about, had one slide and made some comments about athletics and I guess all activities, band, etc. I assume that obviously with the new director from Dane County, some of this needs to be absorbed in terms of how it will impact. But when can we expect some report from either you or Michael on what the plan is? There's a lot of people that have been suffering with without activities for a long period of time.
There are, and honestly, there has to be an update on emergency order number 10 tomorrow, because it expires by midnight tomorrow night.
Right.
So we're expecting to have information to people at some point tomorrow.
Okay, so we're prepared, assuming that it's going to be waived to
If
provide
it's
them.
lifted, we can move. We're ready to move forward. If it isn't, then we'll postpone the start of the winter season until it is.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I don't have anything. So right now, what I would need is a motion from the board to go into closed session, because we'll go into closed session now, and then you've got your, we'll sign out of this meeting and move into our next meeting session. You got a link to that. So the motion would be, we need to confer with legal counsel regarding negotiation of the service agreement for potential middle school site with the Village of Oregon and the City of Fitchburg pursuant to WSStat 1985-1E and 1985-1G, and then to consider employment promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any over any public employee or which we have jurisdiction, in particular, the evaluation of a superintendent under 1985 1C. So I need a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
Anna got in first on the second. Katie, would you call the roll?
Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Ms. Bijak,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Marion,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz,
yes.
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Mr. Zach.
Yes, the board will move into closed session. We will not return into open session. We'll adjourn from there. Board members and administration who are going to be part of that, we'll see you in the next meeting. Thank you, everyone.